Alrighty, we're going to roll in 5, 4, 3. Welcome to the Ham Radio Workbench Podcast, your bi-weekly deep dive on technical topics of interest to the radio amateur. Today we have a very special guest with us. We've got Len, KD0RC, talking about a really cool project, which is a Maestro control head that he designed and built himself. So I'm really curious all about not just what it does, but how he designed it. So we'll get to that in a little bit. If this is the first time you've been listening to the show, where have you been for the last 232 episodes? We have quite a few. You can go and look at those episodes either on our website or on your favorite podcast player. You can go to our website at hamradioworkbench.com. You can connect with us on Facebook. The group is Ham Radio Workbench. And you can also come over to Discord. And we have a Never Expires link on the website. So you can go there and sign up and join our Discord and find a whole bunch of other fellow listeners, both on Facebook and Discord, interested in DIY and building your own projects and field operating and just all kinds of ham radio stuff. So please feel free to join us. And also you can chat with us live and direct on the Brandmeister DMR Talk Group 31075 or the All-Star Node 55915. So that is a little bit of the introduction. And on today's show, I mentioned we have Len with us, KD0RC. And Len is the designer of the Teensy Maestro. And the Teensy Maestro is a remote control head for a FlexRadio. So we'll find out all about that here in a couple of minutes. And Len was first licensed back in 1972, so he beat me by a couple of years. And his first project was building a vacuum tube keyer from the ARRL handbook. And I think I actually remember seeing that. I never built it, but I vaguely remember that. So that's pretty cool, and it actually worked. The first project I built actually was from QST. It was a solid state keyer. So you beat me. Better done with tubes. And Len's active on CW, sideband, a little bit of digital operating, a little bit of casual contesting, and fishing, camping, and general outdoor activity. And this year he plans to do more POTA activities out in the field, as do I think all of us.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about leading up to this project, Len does have a background as a professional software developer, and that helped bring a bunch of years of development and management experience into the project, I'm sure. And needless to say, he enjoys playing around with electronics, including microcontrollers like the Arduino Teensy, which I suspect is why the Maestro Teensy is called a Teensy. I'm kind of betting that's what's inside. And the best thing about the project is he uses it every day. So we're going to get the real skinny here on what it does and how it works. So with that, Len, welcome to the Ham Radio Workbench.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
We're really glad you're here. I hope you're ready for a lot of questions.
I'm set.
Oh, cool.
I wore my special hat, by the way.
Oh, your FlexRadio hat. Wow.
Oh, you got it.
Look
stenciled.
At that.
With my call on. My wife put that on there.
Oh, Mike, I was going to say, I don't have a FlexRadio hat with a call on it.
Me neither. Neither do I.
Yeah. Well, you have to talk to Len's wife and see if she's willing to do that.
I'll have to come out and go skiing. That's what I'll do.
There you go.
We'll just come out and ski one day.
So apparently on the show today, we have Mike, VA3MW. Hey, Mike.
Surprising. How are you?
I'm doing great.
You know what? It's the friggin' middle of, what is it? Oh, see, Rod's not here. It's the middle of April. I had to run out for an errand. That's why I was late showing up. It's snowing in Toronto. That's unusual for here. Now, not like where Vince lives, but, it's snowing.
Wow, that's amazing. So, yeah, I have a sneaking suspicion we're going to hear about what's happening at the remote station.
You might.
With all the weather. Has it been kind of a disaster zone?
Yeah, it's a little version of Thomas's world.
Oh, man.
Nowhere near as bad. Well, actually, some people still don't have power. And it's now day 12, so.
Holy cow.
Wow.
All right, well, we'll hear more about that in a few minutes. Yep. And Thomas, how are you, K4SWL?
Doing fine. There's like a really big storm going on outside. And normally I would be saying if I lose power and everything goes dark and I'm gone, that's why. But because our system made it through Hurricane Helene, I'm pretty sure we'll be okay.
I have a pin on here on my Geochron for you, and I'm looking because I got weather up on it. Oh yeah, it's red
It's
there.
just like it just kind of came out of nowhere. But we've had
Yeah.
really funky weather lately. It's been kind of warm at times, and then I think it was 28 degrees Fahrenheit yesterday morning or something, and so it makes it really hard to decide like if you're going to plant things besides us planting trees around here, which we need trees now again. But yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. So yeah.
Will we get an update on the new tower project?
Yeah, I will. The guys are actually they got down in enough time before the storm came in today. So yeah, I'll let you know. I'll have to kind of go outside and take a look and see how far they made it.
Okay, very good. And last but not least, hello, Vince, VE6LK.
Good after evening, noon, y'all. How's it going?
It's going great. How are things in Alberta? Not as snowy as Ontario?
Not as snowy as Ontario. We saw double-digit warm weather, and that
What?
they started. It started with a 2 in the Celsius. So
Bite me.
we saw 22 degrees this past weekend. I don't return favors, Mike. So 72 degrees on the old scale. It's been wonderful weather. It's chilled off a bit. We are seeing third spring currently. So we're waiting for fourth spring, which should be final. I have not swapped the snow tires yet because the moment I do that, it'll snow again.
So you do that when it's like at the edge of summer, just in case?
Yeah, pretty much. Snow tires are on longer than the summer tires are on, but that's the way it goes.
So Len, how about you? What part of the world are you in?
I'm in Colorado. I live in Broomfield, Colorado, which is about halfway between Boulder and Denver. And we're having ridiculously warm weather right now. But for those of us that have lived here for more than a few seasons, we know a big snowstorm is on the way. And it won't be long until we're making some kind of news about the snow. And then just don't tell anybody, but that snow will be gone in about 2 days. Not like Ontario, where it's going to sit all season.
So
Oh,
how
wow.
close are you, Lynn, to Fort Collins?
Oh, about an hour.
Okay. So it's pretty easy for you to receive WWV then, right?
Oh, yeah. And in fact, when I'm doing stuff with WWV, calibrating my 6400, for example, I do it on 2.5 megahertz
Wow.
because it works
Oh,
day or
wow.
night.
Oh,
Wow.
interesting. You can probably hear it without the power being on.
I can kind of hear it out my window.
Just put your
Feel it with your
put your
feelings.
teeth just barely touching
You
to
can
make
hear
that
it on
little
his-
diode, and you can probably hear
on
it in
his
your head.
fillings. Yeah.
I actually got to tour WWV. Oh, it's been like, I think it was in 2013 or so. And it was really funny because the engineers, they were telling us like all the complaints they get from everybody in town because they're like the scapegoat for everything. They're the people that get blamed when garage door openers don't work, when the microwave gets on the fritz. They're like, it's that big station down there that nobody can tour because it's kind of closed off. And so it's like this mystery station.
That's hilarious.
There was a rumor they were going to shut it down. Is that true?
You know, they came close to shutting it down a few years ago. Actually, it was really funny because I was in Canada at the time, and NPR. It was Scott Simon's show. It was Saturday morning. He interviewed me, and I went to a CBC radio station, a CBC studio in Quebec City. To talk about it, so I remember that really clearly when that was. But fortunately, they didn't shut it down. It worries me now, though, with all of these. I mean, they shut down the Voice of America and all the other U.S. broadcasters, and it's only a matter of time, I think. Oh, that's a terrible pun. It's only a matter of time
Matter
It
of
is.
time.
before
Missed
they
Oh,
before they start looking at the NIST and some of those stations. I really worry about that because I cannot imagine a world without WWV.
Oh,
I can't.
Yeah, no kidding. That just seems so wrong. But alrighty, well, we're going to do a little bit of a round about what's on our workbenches. I do have a couple of quick announcements to make, though, before we get into that. So announcement number one is the Ham Radio Workbench outlet strip kits are in stock still at DigiKey. So if you want one of those, go to digikey.com, search for HRWB, and you'll find the kits there for sale. And also, we are all going to be at Hamvention coming up. And by the time this show drops, it will be in early May, or no, late April, actually. And so it'll be less than a month away from Hamvention. And
Oh, holy
we've-
crap.
we we got.
We have so much stuff to do in 4 weeks.
Oh, tell me about it. So for us here on the workbench, we have a double booth. We have actually two booths side by side. So Halibut Electronics is listed as booth 3011, and Sierra Radio Pactena is listed as booth 3012. And together, they're both Ham Radio Workbench booths as well. So come on by and see our stuff, and come by and chat and say hello. And I think you guys, now, Mike, you have another booth to be in with some company, some radio
something
company.
about that, yeah.
But Thomas, Vince, Paul,
Mark,
a bunch of our friends
Rod.
are going to come by and hang out. Rod's going to be there. Mike,
Who will be
Kate,
there?
yeah,
Who?
Kate,
Rod is going to be there?
Yeah.
shocker.
Yeah, I know the guy.
That'll be like
the guy
3
from west of
Canadians in the
Toronto.
entire
I know.
place.
That's
I know,
right.
Yeah.
And I got a call from Mike K8MRD, and he said, "You going to Hamvention?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Can I come by and hang out in your booth?" I said, "Yeah, sure. Come on over." So
Everybody
Mike's
else
going to
is.
be there.
Yeah, really.
Heaven knows who else. So come on by and check things out. And by the way, just this week, I got 10 Ham Radio Workbench mugs with Vince's
Ooh.
graphic printed on the mugs that shows microvolts and dB and SWR. It's a conversion chart, and it shows return loss and SWR and all that stuff. So I don't know what we're going to do with them, but I'm going to try to ship them out there, and we'll have them there in the booth.
Very
So
nice.
come check it out. So that's it for announcements. So we're going to do a little bit of what's on your workbench. So Len is our guest of honor here. Why don't we start with you? What's on your workbench?
Well, what I've been playing with is an M5 dial. So it's an ESP32 based little processor, and it has a round ring on it that is an encoder. And in the center of that round ring is a round display. And I forget how many pixels it is, but it's not huge. But just playing around with it. Oh, and it has Wi-Fi. So just playing around with it, I have it now hooked up to my Flex 6400, and it actually will go out and find my Wi-Fi, connect to it, hook up to the radio, and display it, and then turn the knob, and it changes the frequency. It's not all that usable because that's not a very high quality encoder or anything. So it's not going to be anything that's going to replace the Teensy Maestro, but it is kind of fun to play with, and it's an interesting little device.
So I assume the original purpose of this would be something like the equivalent of like a thermostat, like a
Yes.
what am I thinking of?
That's the example that they use.
Okay.
It's almost every example that they show is controlling the thermostat.
Okay. So that's like I'm blanking on the brand, but I have them in the house here where it's like a big silver, thermostat. It's like a knob, but you just rotate your fingers around the metal. It doesn't actually turn. Does this actually mechanically turn? It has an encoder, right?
Like the Nest.
Mechanically
Yes,
turns.
thank you,
Yeah.
Vince.
Yeah, Nest. And a guy, Lynn Hansen,
Like this?
he's got
There's
7.
Lynn's right there.
Yeah, there we go. That's it. Yeah, Lynn
That's the
Hansen
one.
did that, and that's a beautiful piece of work.
Wow, cool.
Yeah.
So what Mike is showing is a little black box with a couple of knobs on it. So one of those looks like the M5 that Len was talking about, right, Mike?
Yep.
Yeah,
So that's
the orange dial is the M5.
And that's used as a VFO knob, I assume.
Yeah. It's not powered, of course, but yeah.
Yeah.
They're really there's just so much of this to come. Yeah. There's so much of this stuff coming out. And Lynn calls this the CTR2 dial.
Okay, so
He's done a whole
this
bunch
thing.
of these.
So for those of you who would want to make something like this, I think we're kind of jumping to the punch here a little bit, but while we're at it. So that thing connects Wi-Fi to your router, which talks to your radio. So I assume there's some REST API or some kind of thing where in your code on the Arduino, you're going to send it some kind of API calls, right?
Yeah. So the way the Flex works, the Flex has an astounding API. It's remarkable. It's first of all, it's text-based. So people like us can actually look at the code and understand what it's doing. We can use simple tools like Wireshark and other things to see exactly what the radio is sending and to see exactly what we're sending the radio. So debug becomes a possibility. I am not an engineer. And so for me, I mean, I come from the banking industry, for crying out loud. So my knowledge of ham radio just goes back to fiddling with radios and fiddling with little, Atmel processors and things like that. And so somebody of that level can actually get onto the Flex and make it do things.
That is very cool. Mike, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So they have a whole API block of stuff you can use, but if you don't even want to use the application programming interface libraries, you can actually connect to the radio with a tool like PuTTY and type in a command, and it will stream out all these things, but they're in plain English. Filter bandwidth, VFOA frequency, VFOB frequency, am I in transmit? Am I in receive? It's quite, in the network world, we say it's quite chatty, but that's okay. It's all text, doesn't take up much bandwidth. And then, we have some training stuff available to get you going on it. But George, you could really bring up PuTTY, connect to the radio, and send it a VFO command, and the radio will change frequency.
So if I did that so Mike, if I did that with PuTTY, so in PuTTY, you either are invoking a serial connection to a mechanical serial connector or an SSH session or something like that. So what would it be?
It's a telnet connection, not even
SSH.
telnet.
Okay.
Yeah, TCP. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Got it.
And if you want to know, I'll put it in the show notes. Anna November Hotel 6 Zulu, who is not in Hawaii, in your neck of the woods, George. She did a great learning video, how she talks through about how you change frequency. I've used it because I wanted to say, and it was Len gave me the idea. I didn't use his application, but hey, I can send a spot to my waterfall and say 10-meter simplex frequency that never expires. Right. And so when I dial by 29.600, hey, look at that, and so, or your net frequencies or whatever. But, I think the fact that when Steve Hicks told me this, over 15 years ago or 12 years ago, when I first saw the 6000 series, and I said, there's a LAN connector on the back, Steve, what can I do with that? And Steve literally said everything. And it's true. And FlexRadio uses the same commands for all their applications as well. So, and it's no secret. And if you want to learn like something specific, you can just Wireshark it and say, oh, that's the command we set.
So I have a very specific thing I wanted. I'm kind of rat holing here, Len. I apologize for this. We're going to come back.
That's
but just so you know, Mike, one of the things I want to do, like with the station controller, is when you do like a power output test, what I want to do is I want to save the current state of the radio, like 20 meters, sideband, 100 watts, like bank that information. Then I want to send a command to the radio, go to CW, set it for whatever, 50 watts, and then key down.
Come back.
And then come back and undo it. Taking back to the mode and frequency and everything I was on before. Seems like that'd be real easy to do with this.
I do that in my one utility. So
we need to talk.
So there's your macro. It's already written.
It's already written, and I have made all the source available. So you can go to GitHub and get it all.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you for the diversion. So Len, anything else on the bench? That sounds pretty cool by itself, but anything else you got going?
The other thing that I've been doing lately is playing with a loop on ground antenna. And what I did, I just found it on the net somewhere. I built it to their spec. I built the little transformer. I forget, it's like 2 turns and 5 turns or something silly. Anyway, easy to wind binocular core. Receive only, of course. And then the circumference of my pine tree in my backyard just happens to be 60 feet. So my 60 feet of wire, which is roughly 20 feet in diameter, just hangs on the lowest branches of that tree. And that has been amazing at reducing noise. So with the Flex having a receive-only port, I do that. So then if we're like on Sunday mornings when I'm on the FlexNet, half the time I can't hear some of the guys because I'm pointing either at New York or Austin for net control, and I can't hear the other guys. Well, I'm not going to spin my antenna all over the place. So I just click it to the receive, and that loop picks it right up.
Okay, a couple of quick questions. When you say loop on ground, is it literally sitting on the ground, or is it elevated at all, or how on ground is it?
In my case, I have it elevated about 1.5 feet in the bottom branches of a tree, but it's designed to literally be laying on the ground so the grass covers it and you can mow right over it and not hurt it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it works.
Yeah.
So
in terms of
I
I was going to say,
go ahead, Thomas.
in terms of a receive antenna, a lot of people really like loop on grounds because they do a pretty exceptional job of eliminating local RFI and that sort of thing. I mean, they're just kind of you can't expect it to be some super high gain antenna, but it works really effectively for some people. And it literally is just like literally on the ground. It's nice for people like me too. And I haven't put one here at my house because I don't really have a good use case for it. I actually have typically had a sky loop antenna, so sort of the opposite.
Oh.
It's up about 65 feet or something, going around the house. Because I don't have a lot of RFI. I hadn't before. I've got a little bit more RFI than I used to with our new solar system, but loop on ground's really nice to hear if I needed it because it's one that bears and deer and things like that can't walk through and destroy every night because. And I'm really curious, Len, do you have to put like wire nuts or something, or like because yours is still elevated a foot? Do you have wildlife or anything you have to worry about at your place?
We just have innumerable squirrels, and they like to chew on wires.
They do.
But I haven't had any problem with it yet. I haven't looked at it in a couple of weeks. I've been down with a cold, but when I go out, maybe in the next couple of days, I'm going to check it for squirrel teeth marks. But no, and in fact, the little transformer box that I just got a Home Depot box and just lay it on the ground. I mean, it's literally just on the ground, and then
It defies everything we were told about antennas, right? We were always told everything's got to go up high, but
it
beverage
does.
over ground, they work.
They work.
So I've never done this before, but my understanding, tell me if this is the idea. My understanding is that like you guys are saying, it's a lower noise antenna. And I would imagine that the signal strength of the actual station is going to be lower than what you would hear on your antenna, but that the noise would be lower than that difference. So the difference is
Correct.
greater,
SNR.
right?
It's
Is that
all
sort of
about
the idea?
Yeah, signal to noise. And in the case of the Flex, I have so much gain available on the front end that I normally never use. So I just crank up the gain until I get, that kind of 100 dB-ish of dynamic range by having the no antenna to antenna be about a 10 dB difference. And that gives me my maximum dynamic range, and that's more than enough. Every once in a while, I find if I bump it up an additional 8 dB of gain, I'll pick up something that I couldn't otherwise pick up. But generally speaking, I leave it like that, and it works great.
And I think it's the key. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
was going to say that's
the
just the key.
Flex keeps the gain figures per antenna, which is really important. So when I switch back and forth among antennas, I always have the appropriate RF gain set. What was that, Thomas?
I was just going to say that I think that one of the reasons why loops on ground have they've been quite popular, especially among people who really want to focus on receiving, is that we have some high dynamic range options available now with SDRs and things like flexes and stuff that can really take advantage of something where you have that difference between the signal to noise ratio. And I think that's the reason why a lot of these loops and things like that people haven't considered before, I mean, these are worth exploring for that very reason. So I'm really glad to hear you've got a loop on ground. I think that's great.
Yep. My next experiment is to put a much bigger one up so that I can do better on 160.
Is the one you put up mostly for 40 or 80?
It works on 40 really well. It works on 20 ridiculously well.
Oh, really?
80, excuse me, 80 and 160 it's kind of marginal. So I'm going to put a longer piece of wire up on it and see if I can't improve that.
So and it's about a half wave. Did you say about a half wave on 60 feet or so?
It's 60 feet of wire.
Okay.
So it's a 20-foot
It's
diameter
pretty
loop.
small.
What's that, Mike?
It's pretty small, actually.
Yeah, it's small.
Yeah, because we think loops are pretty big, but
Mike, you have some like low antennas, receive antennas, don't you?
I will talk about them. But yeah, there's Beverage on ground as well. You can do 160 meter Beverage on ground. It's only, finger quote 200 feet long if you want it for 160 meters. But it's a game changer on a noisy night. And George, with the property you have, you could you can put it a long way away. It doesn't need to be anywhere, and you feed it with a couple of feeds of RG6, and you could reverse it. So you could have, in your case, Asia and, not Asia, flipping it. But where we think of these things as gain antennas to hear the station, but often on another antenna I have, you flip it the other way because you might have a big thunderstorm behind you. And on my wire 40, it doesn't have a lot of gain, but it's, if I'm trying to work Europe and there's a big thunderstorm in the American Midwest, I flip that on, I don't hear any static crashes.
Oh, wow.
So there's two parts, either receive gain or get rid of the noise. You can use antennas either way. And then you can get it, I guess you can get into fancy beam steering and stuff too, but yeah, Beverage on ground, I have a new design I'm going to talk about in a minute.
You just sold me on a Beverage on ground, actually, because my buddy.
Oh, absolutely. You should do
yeah,
that, man.
Yeah, my buddy Vladdo's been. Actually, I've got all the pieces together to do it. I just haven't done it yet. But again, for me, it's really nice because I don't have to worry about the wildlife going through it every single night. Because we have lots of black bears here, and they're always wandering around. So having something that's just on the ground, I don't have to repair all the time is wonderful. But to be able to switch it back and forth, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah,
there's a ton of kits out there for that. So.
And I can't wait to see your first field activation with a Beverage. And you're going to use about 8 camping sites next to each other to stretch that thing out.
And what percentage is the Beverage? So a while back in episode 187, we interviewed Gary W9XT about this very topic. Beverage, loops on grounds, and he has some products that help with that as well. So I put a link to that in the show notes. Absolutely fascinating topic.
Thanks, Vince. I remember I was thinking there was something like that, but I couldn't remember what episode. You're very helpful. Thank you.
Every once in a while.
All the time. So, Len, anything else before we move on?
No, I think that's kind of what I've been playing with.
Okay, very good. So Mike, I have to go to you next because I got a string of messages from Mike this last week that was basically like one catastrophic event at the remote station after another and I was like, are you vying for #1 sympathy vote with Thomas after all that?
The worst
what's
part
been
too,
going on?
We do this on MSN Messenger. God, when was the last time we used that? We do this on iMessage. And I happen to be on my iPad, so I can type a lot. I'm not like hunting and choosing or dictating, right? So when you get a long one, I'm typing it in on my iPad. So about 10 or 12 days ago, so what's the date today? Today is...
the 10th.
The 10th.
The 10th. So about 10 days ago, central Ontario, so north of Toronto, and a big swath got hit with a great, very impressive ice storm. And if you've ever lived through those, there's ice storms that are really cool, and then there's the other ones. And this is akin to it's okay. Yeah, this is akin to sort of what Thomas went through, where we had up to an inch of some repeater.
Sorry about that. I need to turn the volume down on everything.
It's a KJ6 as a matter of fact.
Sorry about that, old man.
The guys at the Long Island CW Club are going to be disappointed I didn't copy that right away. Hats off to them, by the way, if you're learning to improve your CW.
Oh, they're amazing.
LICW, absolute amazing program.
They're amazing.
But anyway, so we got this huge ice storm. I have a picture somewhere, I'll have to get it, that shows a day later, almost 40 hours later when I got up there, it's about an inch thick of ice, and it had fallen off one of my dipoles. Now, interesting, that was just on a dipole, and it was pouring ice rain. And the way freezing rain happens is you end up with warm air over top of a layer of cold air Or is it the other way around? Anyway, it freezes. It comes down super cooled and freezes on, you have warm rain coming on cold, hitting cold surfaces and freezing. This is the way it works. Anyway, so I lost almost every wire antenna except the 160 meter vertical. I lost most of my tall trees, including my 90-foot tree that had the 80 meter V in it, which was gangbusters. And I'll tell you, if you're, so that's down. And cedar trees are ice magnets, so all those broke in half. Some of them took out, the property has 2 power feeds, one to each building, coming in Canada, we call it hydro. And it tore one of those right off the boathouse wall. And you guess where the remote station is? The boathouse. Of course, when that went down, that severed the internet cable, which is RG11, at a junction. So it wasn't so bad. And yes, I have a RG11 crimping kit, so I fixed that right away. We got our power back to the main cottage after 7 days. The boathouse has no power today, but a 200-foot extension cord running over to it, which got the modem back up, which got the cameras back up, and I can run QRP for me, which is like 50 watts, on one radio at a time. So I'm on a bit of a power budget. Of course, when I'm,
because of the voltage drop too has got to be brutal over 200 feet. Yeah,
it could be. But I forgot, because I had to unplug things and plug them into the, the extension cord. And I get home and I went, you dummy, you didn't move the rotator or the stepper power. So it's stuck on 20 meters pointing, I don't know which way. Well, the SWR is low, so I think it's 20 meters on the stepper. So I got back sort of on the air, but, we have a work party tomorrow to go clean up about 15 trees that have come down. And I got one for you, Thomas. My chainsaw wouldn't run and started to run and slow down and run and slow down and die, and then it would start again until it got hot. Have you ever had to clean the spark arrestor?
Yeah, I've heard that really makes a huge difference. Yes.
That was, and that pulled, I don't have any hair, pulled my hair out in that one. So, that was yesterday. I got that one fixed. So today, here's what happens is the station disappears offline. Well, we have 200-foot extension cord, maybe a little bit longer. Of course, it's not one extension cord. Did I mention the lake? Did I mention the lake flooding? So it hit the junction on the extension cord lying on the lawn, which tripped the GFI at the cottage, and the whole station goes down. So I have to text my neighbor's son-in-law, hey, Ole, do you mind running over? And by the way, you might want to wear rubber boots. So I get these text messages, tell him how to reset everything. He goes, it won't happen again. I put the junction up in a cedar tree. So the cameras come up and we get a good look around. Now the water's probably record high. The boathouse is surrounded by water. You have to go, and we knew it was coming up. So let me rewind. I get up there last Sunday. It's a week later, and I have to go check the tower. The tower's in the woods. It's in the swamp almost. Birch tree fell down. It's leaning on a guy wire. So I've got to run another guy wire, drop the primary guy wire, walk back out there with now the heavy chainsaw because the light chainsaw won't start, wading through hip waders because there's still ice on the lake. I'm up to my knees. I get this all down, and the birch tree is still standing, but I have to get it to fall. If it falls to the left, it's not good. It's going to hit the temporary guy wire. So, this is chainsaw 101 on controlling your fall. I made a mistake. I cut a loaded limb, and I just ended up with the chainsaw at shoulder level caught. You're trying to push it up and down, and anyway, eventually that all.
That's never happened to me, Mike, but I can imagine.
Not this week. In the middle of all this, so I'm standing on my knees in water with a chainsaw, and the phone rings. So I answer it on my watch because I can't get to my phone because it's inside the hip waders. I can't put the chainsaw down, and it's going. Yeah, Mr. Walker, we're calling about your appointment for your bone scan. And I say, you ready to write down a date? And I go, no, not really.
Jeez.
Because I can see it's the hospital calling.
You were reminding me of like the past 3 weeks. I've had, I've been out the chainsaw with, I should say probably 3 weeks, 2 weeks ago. I finished up the main project, but like, it's funny because I had hearing protection on too, when you're messing with a chainsaw, and I had my Apple ear pods inside and so like someone would call me, I've got the chainsaw in my hand, just like you said, and I don't even know who it is really, but like inside my ears, my phone's saying, "Would you like me to answer the call?" And it'll say, a phone call from, and it'll say from area code blah blah blah, and I would say yes, and there'd be this long pause, and I'd have to yell like, "Yes," because I've got my ear, I've got my ear protection on. Hearing protection, and then someone would come on and have to turn off the chainsaw and do everything, and it was always just super awkward, even with that. But like, I feel your pain. I have gotten my chainsaw stuck so many times where I needed to use another chainsaw to get that chainsaw out, to relieve the pressure off of the. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
I thought I was going to have to go get the buck saw because
Oh.
the other saw is dead, the small one. Anyway, well, probably would have started because it was cold, but. So anyway, all this, and then in the middle of all this, these chat you guys are getting, because I'm deciding now how to redo my wire antenna system. I've lost the 60, I've lost the 30, I've lost the 80, and I go, oh, maybe I'll just build and to give Callum at DX Commander, I spent a lot of time looking at his stuff. Now we agree it's nothing more than a quarter wave with a common feed, but it's a good design, and I thought, well, if I put a multi-band antenna over here and feed it a single feed line, I've got a great antenna for an SO2R situation, which you can use on any FlexRadio because it's a common feed. So I can be on 20 and 40 at the same time easily, actually lovingly. It's designed to work that way because the Flex always looks at the entire spectrum. So that's where all these chats came from. And then I started to laugh, Len, when you mentioned, beverage over ground, beverage ground loop, whatever. I have a BUW right now.
Beverage underwater.
Beverage underwater.
Oh, I had to think about that.
And I'm wondering, I'm trying to think, yeah, I can turn that on. I'm going to have a listen to see what it looks like because I can turn on that preamp, even with what little power I have there. So, yeah, so that's been an interesting couple of weeks, and they finally got there today to run the new, when I say triplex. So the owner's responsible for the power from the house to the
pole.
Essentially where the power to the pole, where the pole pig is. So we've finally got a guy in. They've been great, and so that's, I think, all been done and certified. Now we have to get Hydro back to finish the connection.
Right.
But fortunately, we're not living there, so it's not quite as not a big deal. And I've got a little power, so I'm good. I think that's the short story. There's probably more.
Oh, good golly.
And I got to go find it. I got to go find a 90-foot tree to put, or something similar in a forest to try to get the 80 back up, because the 180 I had was sort of in the middle of nowhere. So it was easy to drone or potato cannon or air cannon a line right over the middle because it's 8 feet wide at the top, and then pull it up and then deal with the ends. And if you've ever tried to put up a big wire antenna with trees, you really can't do it with your spouse.
I don't have that experience. Could you explain why?
It's kind of like backing up a trailer.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was going to say that exactly.
Oh,
It's exactly the same thing.
Oh, honey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said when you were trying to put up that stupid wire antenna in that damn tree.
Yeah. Just snap it around the end. What end? Oh, anyway, so today I phoned my buddy Ken VA3SK, and I said, Ken, you're gonna have to come down for a day. It's like, so he's up in North Bay. So I think that's a short story. I'm sure there's more, but
So when this is all said and done, you probably have a huge pile of wire that it all came
it's all
down.
lying on the ground.
Is it all reusable, or is it like a mess?
Oh yeah, nothing broke. So more funny stories. So the 60 meter's been up forever. I couldn't get it down if I wanted to because I just fire lines over trees, and of course the tree had grown around the line.
Right.
At the high end. Well, that tree broke, so it all fell down. So I got the whole 60 back. And I wouldn't be surprised that part of the reason it broke was the weight on it on the 60-meter dipole.
Yeah.
Between that and then I use shock cord, about usually 10 feet of shock cord at each end when I'm going tree to tree. So, that's nice and thick. And then I have a nice either Ballon Designs Ballon in the middle, which is in that classic 3-inch, 3-inch, 2-inch
Yeah.
electrical box. And they're all great, but they all survived. None of them broke on the fall. I found the 80-meter one while I eventually got to the coax and through the ice, and it was sitting in 3 feet of water because it's over what we call the lagoon.
So are all these antennas like inverted V's, or what are they configured
The
as?
30 is an inverted V, the 80 is a 30V, and the 60 was a dipole that was pretty high. And they all rocked. So the 30 would normally come down for the summer because I sort of would throw it up in November when nobody's around, and it was all like right in your face with, I'd walk over to a cedar tree and just tie off the ends and leave the rope hanging there. And then, at this time of the year when we start to open, I'd go bring it down. But it's down. And there's I was going to say one more thing. Highly recommend if you're doing like 80 meters, you are more than okay to run LMR 240 to that. You're not going to lose anything. It's light. So it really, and it was Bob Morton, Vince, that told me to go that just to keep a ton of weight off it, at least on the vertical part.
Yeah, LMR 240 RG8X, for those of you who don't
it'll
speak
take full
LMR.
power.
Yeah, it totally will. Mike, you've got the opportunity here to, I'm trying to see the bright side of all of this calamity. You've got opportunity to stretch those antenna wires in different directions and try to work different entities now.
That too. Or I could just also maybe wait because Thomas is going to come visit. You might be stringing antennas.
Yeah, I'm up for that. I'm up for that. I can even bring you wire if you want. And I can bring you some really nice gray coax.
Not a chance.
that good eBay gray coax?
Yeah, I mean, I get it from this great AliExpress.
Oh, not anymore.
Yeah.
It was 187% tariff on it.
Yeah, really.
Well, as of the time we started recording, it was 187%. It could be different by the time we're done recording.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, it could.
No
As
doubt.
you say, your 401k is now just a 401.
Right.
Jeez.
John Stewart said that. I'll steal that from him on the Daily Show. But anyway, I think that's enough, George.
Okay, very good, Mike. I'm glad things are kind of getting back to normalish.
In the grand scheme of things, we got off pretty lucky. So from I got a lot of work to do, but from no building damage, just lost the triplex. I don't know, maybe it's probably $1,000 bill to put that stuff back up, I hope. And but
I'm glad you had no
we're not living
damage, like none to your house or anything.
We do a lot of preventative tree maintenance, and so we'll get these. You get them too, right? All of a sudden, you'll get a front come through with 100-mile-an-hour winds. We get them as well, and everybody else has huge trees down. We never do, so touch wood.
Very good. Thomas, while you're at it, what's on the bench?
Well,
sharpening chainsaws.
Yeah, fortunately, so I finished my last big round of chainsaw work probably 2 weeks ago, and since then I've only done like some small stuff, and like we've done brush removal and stuff. My wife and I did some of that this morning, but that stuff's kind of coming around now. It's just kind of trying to repair some of the scarred areas at the in the forest and everything. I'm trying to put chips down and some ground cover and things as spring starts to move in here. It's greening up here in the mountains now. And but basically the thing I've been working on, what's on my workbench, not a whole lot right now because I am literally doing a shack purge right now in no small way. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I tend to do a version of this every single year, but it has been, oh my gosh, it has just been really rough. And hey, Wrangler, for those of you who are listening to the podcast, you can't see Wrangler up on Vince's lap, but he's such a sweet dog. So thanks for putting him on the camera. I love Wrangler. So I'm doing the shack purge, and this year I've got a completely different way of doing it. So I really do want to get rid. It's like all of not the radios, not my cables, not my power supplies, none of the heart of like a shack, none of that stuff I'm really planning to get rid of, except for a couple things. I'm thinking about getting rid of a couple things, but not many. It's everything else. It's like all the other detritus, right, that goes along with it that you accumulate over time and you don't need. And so here's how I'm doing it this year. I have tried everything. When I do a shack purge, by the way, so my shack's pretty small. It's a small room. You can't tell if you're watching the video. It's just like one little piece of my shack, but it's not a whole lot bigger than what's in this video. And it's kind of I have a lot of vertical space. I've got 9-foot ceilings here. I've got shelves on one side of the room, which were designed to handle like tons of weight, because at the time, especially when I was building the house, I had a real thing for boat anchors and things. So I wanted to be able to hold multiple boat anchors. It's tied into the truss system above in the ceiling and everything. So it's like you could put elephants on these shelves and it would be fine. The other side, like I just have some room. I have one place to sit besides my office chair, and I actually have an exercise bike in this room. Um, in the past, I'd literally remove everything from the shack, everything, the dirt, the dust, everything, and then I start to put it back in, and then I kind of make boxes of things that I'm going to donate, maybe sell, maybe give to people, and then I just try to put back in, the most important things and get rid of all the junk. This year, I'm not doing a Marie Kondo thing where something, what is it? She says, sparks joy. I'm like, a lot of things spark here. So
That's a different problem.
it's a totally different problem. Um, but like what I decided to do, because I want to do kind of more of a scorched earth approach to the stuff that's just piling up. So I have, and I'm being very organized about it. And this is going to take probably 2 weeks because I'm being organized. I'm removing everything in sections of the room at a time because it's going to take longer. I can't literally purge the entire room all at once. So I've done like 2 shelves already, plus 2 storage bins that I had. And I go out and I say, what will I use for the next year? And that goes in my shack. And the things that need to be stored that I might use in the next year, like for me, it ends up being a lot of things that I'm testing, prototypes of things, just stuff I want to do, maybe to test in the field or try out. I've put those in boxes. I label the box with a number, and I have a spreadsheet with an inventory of everything that's in it. And all of the little projects are in these individual Ziploc bags with a label on them, that I'm just using like a Sharpie marker on the like writable portion of the bag and putting them in there. So I can go back through my spreadsheet and I can find out which box, because in the spreadsheet, each tab is a different box. Then I have boxes that I'm putting in my attic. Those are the things I don't think I'm going to need and I haven't used probably in the past year. And I'm putting those in bags, neatly done, and putting those in boxes. And those boxes are inventoried completely so that if I have to find something, I can go back and find it. I know which box to look for, and I'll find the bag inside the box. It's a surprising amount of items. I've got a box right now that's like half full, and it already has like 40 things in it that are inventoried. Because sometimes it's like small stuff, like oh, I don't know. Like, this is not a good example of something I would store away, but like the thing that's like in my shack, but like KX3 and KX2 USB cables for doing programming. Something I don't use a whole lot, but I want access to. They don't take up a lot of space. And so they take up like almost no space in the box. So the box has a lot of stuff in it. But those boxes, the ones where I don't think I'm going to need them for the next year, and I don't need them immediately, those go in my attic with a date on them of the date that I packed the box. If I come back 1 year later and I haven't pulled anything from that box, my plan is to take that stuff to a ham fest or give it away or whatever. And I'm just going to purge all that stuff. And so there's not going to be a lot of sentimental things in there. It's mostly all the stuff like, oh, I can't get rid of that because it's useful, or I don't know someone who needs it, right? But if I had to pick up and move, at least they're already packed up. I know that they're not anything that's mission critical for me, and that's the way I'm going to do it. And then, of course, I've got boxes of things I'm still donating and giving away and stuff. And so the process is tedious, but I am finding that as I go through it, like, you get better at just kind of saying, okay, I'll throw it in the box that's going to go in the attic and it's going to be labeled. And I'm not going to cry if this thing's not there. Maybe I didn't need it then. It's the stuff that you really do end up testing, the things that the accessories mainly that you just don't need. So it's a different approach for me, but I think it's working. I'm now, let's see, I'm up on, you can't see it here if you're watching the video, but like up above me, because where my camera is actually where all the shelves are in my office. And so the shelf that my computers are on, they've all been cleared. And I've redone all the wiring behind the radios and behind the computers. Then the shelf above it, I have like my VHF gear, my speakers. I have just some speakers in here for doing audio, and I have my BC348Q, which is my World War II era receiver that I love, and it made the cut because I'm never going to get rid of that thing. And it was actually kind of fun because I hadn't turned it on probably since the storm. I hadn't turned it on. I disconnected it from the antennas and stuff, so I was able to turn that on. And so the shelves above that, there are two shelves above that that I'm yet to go through. One of them is a shelf of like all of my field QRP radios. Now, in truth, I'll probably just end up organizing those. There aren't a whole lot of those I'm going to let go of, but I want to try to find a more efficient way to store them and to make them readily available. The shelf above that, which is not an easy shelf to get to, mainly has all of my stuff that's kind of like in my archives. I actually have Spectrum archive recordings of HF Spectrum that I've planned to dump on archive.org at some point for the project I'm working on, but I just haven't made my way out to San Francisco to do it in person because doing it over the internet just takes forever. I've got a lot of books, my handbooks and things like that, and I'm not going to get rid of all of those, but I'm probably going to pare down 50% of the things on that shelf. I do have some vintage, I'd say solid state vintage portable radios that I absolutely love and have a lot of sentimental value that I have a hard time getting rid of, and I don't think I can. My Panasonic RF-2200, which is probably the most badass looking portable radio ever made, that's a receiver, and the audio is spectacular. Probably one of the best AM or medium wave receivers ever. With a rotatable ferrite bar on top of it. It is just such a wonderful radio. If you don't know it, look up Panasonic RF-2200. It's just a fabulous radio. And my buddy Vlado recapped it for me. It's kind of a gift one time. And I have a few others. I have some sentimental ones. One that belonged to my grandfather, my very first shortwave radio. And so but I've got to go through all this stuff, and it's going to take a while. And I keep getting interrupted with things like life that we're doing right now. So I had to go out and like do brush removal and some stuff like that today. We had some more work done on the house. It's going to take a long time. My wife's being very patient with me at the moment because stuff's in our living room, or I should say our dining room area, and on our screened-in porch. I'm trying to keep it out of the kitchen because there's not going to be a lot of room to move around. But it's a really big process, but it's enjoyable. I did find out something. I did a little sleuthing and figured out the reason why I was getting such really poor results on HF here lately. I thought it was the propagation, and turned out that it's because the radiator came off of my antenna outside.
Well,
Funny
and
that.
that is propagation in a form. I mean, you just need 100 dB more of drive to get signal.
Well, they do call it wireless, but just not that wireless.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Oh,
So
man.
I was operating properly wireless. Actually, I didn't make any contacts, but the funny thing is, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, where you have like the transformer like of an end-fed half wave, but no radiator on it. You still hear FT8 on all the bands. Why is that? I mean, with my ears, I hear it. Like, I'm sure I could probably decode a ton of stuff with like literally no radiator on it at all, just the transformer. So, but anyway, I went outside, and this was more of like a homebrew sort of situation I had sitting out there, and I replaced it with a Pactena.
Oh yeah.
So I just did that yesterday, and so I've got a 40-meter linked, so it's a 4020 linked Pactena out there now, and I know that that'll last a long time. The problem I had with it, I didn't think about this earlier, but when I put it up, I did it sort of like I do in the field, which is when I want to keep the antenna in a good slope or whatever, I'll tie off the other end of it. And I did that, but we have had a series of, Mike was mentioning this earlier. It's not uncommon for us to get 60, 65 mile per hour gusts outside at this altitude. It's been really like nerve-wracking this year. After the storm, everybody in our house and every neighbor I know, we all get like genuinely, it creates anxiety now when we hear the wind really whipping up outside. It just changed everything going through the hurricane. But we had some really strong winds come through, and it just moved the tree and it snapped because it didn't have, I didn't. What I really should do is just put a weight on the other end to hold it down so it can bend and move with the tree. But I hadn't done that, so I've done that with the Pactena.
So is that the end-fed half wave
Yes,
that you're using? Okay.
it's the end-fed half wave. I've got like quite a lot of coax going out to the point. Like I would put up a random wire antenna out there, but I'd have to re-engage my remote antenna tuner, which is kind of offline right now. But it's just like a Z11 Pro or something from LDG that I power with a little gel cell battery that has Mike Bryce made these micro M plus charge controllers, solar charge controllers, ages ago. Really simple charge controllers that are very RF quiet. And I have one of those that's been hooked up to it. And I think like a 4-watt panel, SolarX panel, that's been running that thing for 15 years. And that same old it was a dead battery when I put it in there. And so it still runs because that LDG needs nothing. But anyway, all that to say that I bypassed it and I'm just using an end-fed half wave. And then if I have to go off of the 40, 20, 15, 10 meter bands, then I'll use my ATU inside, which I know is not that efficient, but it works. But yeah,
There's nothing wrong with using the AT. I mean, I think we get kind of hung up on what is the ideal way to do it. It'd be better if you put the tuner right at the feed point of the antenna.
Sure.
But there's really nothing wrong with putting it inside the shack. And people will argue like, well, that's not the best thing to do. But, if it's the most convenient thing to do, or if it's the only way you could do it, there's nothing wrong with that.
no. And I mean, to be honest, like the thing I've found over the years of operating radio, and it kind of comes down to like these antennas we were talking about earlier, like it kind of goes against everything you've ever been taught, but they work, and they work with modern transceivers and SDRs and things like that. I think that a lot of times with antennas, we get too hung up on having like a perfect setup. And you're right. I've got really good cable going out to it, really, low loss cable. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference when I'm running an ATU into it, and it'll tune everything. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask you a slightly off topic question, but
Yeah.
And that is, I know you started out when you were talking about how you're kind of separating your stuff and organizing it and so on. And there's one thing that, of course, is like the main question that I didn't hear you address, and maybe I just missed it. And that is, out of the herd, have you identified any radios that you are going to get rid of? Not asking for a friend. I'm just curious.
There are a couple. So one is slated to be kind of sell trading with my buddy Miles, who you'll meet at Hamvention, my buddy Eric's son, Miles. And he's been wanting an HF radio for his car. And so I'm going to trade him kind of thing, an FT891. Which I'm going to give him for like a real song. He's a great guy, and it'll be great for him to have an HF radio. So, like I just want to support him. So that one's going to be gone. Someone asked me this week about my Venus SW3B, which has been in a headrest pouch kit in my car for a long time. So it's like it's literally attaches to the back of my headrest with Velcro, and it's there all the time. I love it. But I thought about it, and I'm like, I have two MTR3Bs, the LCD version. I have an MTR5B mountain topper, so a 5-bander, and I have the new Curahi MTR3B. And I'm like, you know what? I can probably let go of the SW3B at this point. And so I'll probably end up selling that to him. Since he really wants one, I'll give him a good deal on it. In terms of other radios, I have somehow accumulated a lot of QRP lab stuff over the years. And so I may probably let go of some of the extra copies of those just because I don't need them. But other than that, no. I mean, most of the radios that are here in my shack are ones that are that I take to the field regularly, ones I love. So, yeah.
Okay, so
there
the
something
odd
really
USB cable is on the block, but everything else
Yes, it
stays. So this is not really shack cleaning, is it? This is just shack pushing stuff around and shoving stuff up into the attic.
is shoving it into the attic. But next year, I'll stick to my guns. And if I haven't pulled anything from those boxes, anything that's left in those boxes, it's gone.
Yeah,
It's just
that's what
going.
you say now.
That's
Yeah.
what it's going. Or I can convince Vince to come down here with a trailer, and he can take it back.
Be careful what you wish for.
Hey, I would totally welcome that. Or Mike, any of you guys can come down here and collect it up. The only other thing I've been messing with lately is my Elecraft K1. And if you don't know the Elecraft K1, it came out after the K2, which was like one of Elecraft's first flagship radios. And it was a kit. It's an analog radio. Like the encoder is analog and only turns so many times the encoder does. Mine is a 4-bander with the ATU and the internal battery kit, which is, I found out, I didn't realize this, is mutually exclusive. If you want you can either have the noise blanker or the battery kit. When you get the battery kit, it comes with a different speaker and a different top, and it takes up the place physically of where the noise blanker module will go in. Mine doesn't have the noise blanker. I don't think I really need it. But I love this radio, love it so much, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. And the characteristics of the receiver and the audio are superb. Like, it really is a phenomenal little CW only radio. And so I've been having a lot of fun with it here lately.
Okay, very good. Vince, how about you? What's on your bench?
A mute button is on my bench. I've actually had time to have something on the bench. So we've been very busy selling Morse tutor kits via e6lk.com. You can find them there. And it has been incredibly interesting lately to try and, deal in a world of changing shipping requirements. And we won't get into that into too much detail. But so I had the coolest thing happen to me this past weekend, and I landed up at Canada's largest model railroading show. And I was there to work in the Calgary Club's booth. I'm not a member, but whatever. I'll go out and help support the cause to talk about ham radio, because we know there's a lot of railroad people that are wannabe radio geeks, or they're scanner geeks or whatever. So we had an informational sheet with a bunch of frequencies laid out, and we had a couple of Morse tutors there. So what I didn't anticipate was how much kids like making noise. And if there's something with noise in a booth, they stop. And if they can press a button and make a noise, like on a straight key or a paddle key, they are all about it. If they can earn a chocolate for forming a letter correctly, they're really all about it. So that was fun. And so I was at that booth, and the local news crew came by, and they were doing some B-roll footage, and they caught me showing a kid how to do some Morse code. So that was pretty neat. So
that's awesome.
That was a great Sunday afternoon. But I have to tell you, I ran into a group of people, and I'll show you something on screen here. I ran into a group of people called the Morse Telegraph Club. Now, these people are an international club, and it turns out the Calgary chapter is the most active of all of them. And they are in the middle of rebirthing telegraph for railroad. So I'm going to get into the differences in a minute, but let's just let that sink in. They're taking age-old hardware like what you're seeing me put on screen, and I'm, for those of you who are listening to the podcast, I'm putting a link to my 7-minute video interview that I did with them, with lots of still shots in it, so you can go see it for yourself. They're putting all this old period gear back into museums and into places where there's working railways in place. The railways might not be long, but and how they're connecting it is the really cool part. So what you're seeing on screen, first off, in the upper left corner is a sounder, a telegraph sounder, and it makes a click, 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 click. It's a relay. It's a solenoid. You're seeing a variety of keys down on the table, a Vibraplex key, a J38 straight key, or J38 lookalike, and you're seeing a couple of glass insulators, and you're seeing the American Morse code. Again, I'll talk about that difference in a minute. But these would normally be connected over a pair of wires, and the slider on the side of a J38 key breaks the circuit so that that guy at that station can start sending. And when he's done sending, he closes the slider on the side of the key so that the circuit is made again and another station can start sending. And so everybody hears, it's kind of a broadcast mechanism that way. Everybody hears what's going on. So very cool stuff. Now, the difference in the code is they're using American Morse. So we got to go back now to the historical roots of Morse and Vail, the two guys who invented the code that we call Morse code. And they invented it for the railroad. And as Kevin explained to me in the interview, and go watch the video. It's a great little 7-minute video. People already tell me they love it. It's got some great historical content in it. That you can hear dotted on a speaker, but it doesn't come through very well on a solenoid. So it's dotted dit. It's letter C in American Morse. The guys who can make real money, they said as a sidebar, going down a rabbit hole, not that this show ever does that, are the guys who could hear American Morse on one side and translate it to what us ham operators know as international Morse on the other side, so that they could translate from railroad to ships at sea. Those are the guys that made the real money. And as it turns out, I know one or two of those people. I just didn't know they knew this. So it's kind of exposed me to this club that's ham adjacent that are really enthusiastic about bringing back this history. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you the coolest part. They interface it over the internet. So now he's taken some old set-top boxes, he's dropped Linux on it, and it squirts out over an IP address. And when there's no traffic on the line, he's grabbing a feed from the BBC News so that the sounder is going click-clack, 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 and attracting people.
That's awesome.
It is totally awesome.
I love that.
So how did I hear about these guys? So I responded to this post on Discord. Is anybody from the Calgary area going to Hamvention? I have a box of stuff I'd like to ship back to a club in Calgary, the Morse Telegraph Club. And I'm like, what's this Morse Telegraph Club? I've never heard of it. I've lived here since 1997. And that's how I discovered it. And 2 weeks later, serendipitously, I'm at the train show, and they have a booth. And the Central Alberta Railway Club has another booth with a sounder. And then Heritage Park which is a period park in Calgary, has another booth. And all three of them have sounders going. And they can send messages back and forth to each other all along this. So what a convergence of old tech and new tech. And for me, such a heartwarming story. These guys talked my ear off for close to an hour, and I distilled it down into about 7 minutes of, some pointed questions. Very, very passionate. So look them up. A link in the show notes, morsetelegraphclub.com. It's that simple. You might find a chapter in your area. So that's one of the things that I've been doing. I've been editing the video, so I kind of call that on my workbench, if you will. So that's pretty neat.
That's awesome.
I love it. I love this.
Such a great story, too. So
I've always wondered too, Vince, have you listened to the Morse code coming through a sounder, and how have you been able to interpret much of it?
There are stunningly only about, I want to say, a dozen differences. That number's not right. In my video, I've grabbed a chart from Wikipedia that actually highlights the difference between the two.
Right.
Have I tried to listen to it and decode it? No, not very much. And one of the members of the Calgary Club approached me and says, yeah, I was a member of that for a while, but it really screwed with my head to try and do both Morse codes. So I stopped being a member of their club. But I really believe in what they're doing. Like, I might just go take out a membership just to support them. Oh, by the way, so here's a funny story. So at Heritage Park, one of the volunteers had a couple of daughters who comes out and wants to help. So the daughters signed up to be two of the first 5 students being taught American Morse or railroad telegraphy. And so the daughters now at night get and tapping on their walls to each other's bedrooms. And the mother, the volunteer at the park, has gone back to the Instigator and Wire Chief that's Kevin's title, and said, I have to take your course so I know what my kids are saying.
This is so, Vince, this is so funny because last weekend, I didn't mention this, but one of the things I love doing every single year, and it's the first weekend in April, is our Maker Fair here in Asheville. We have a Maker Fair, and it's just so much fun. And I usually help out with the Asheville Radio Museum. I'm a member and a volunteer there. And one of the things we put on our table, because there's a lot of kids at this thing, is we have the two MFJ code practice oscillators with the straight keys that that you can just, and so they have little speakers on them, and so they go over and play. Well, what I always do is we have the little sign out that shows how a Morse code, what it looks like and how to tap it out. And so I give them a really quick little primer, and I say, okay, send me your name and let me see if I can get it. And so they'll send it, and when they're able to do it and I get it, it blows their minds, because
Totally.
they're like, you really understand that? And I was like, it's not that hard, right? But one of the parents came by, and he didn't catch his daughter doing this with me, and I said, I can't remember what her name was. I said, is your name Elaine? And he just was like, whoa. And she's like, that's it. And he said, oh my goodness. He said, this is such a useful skill because like in the movies, if you're in a room and you need to tap to somebody next to you, you can use Morse code to do that. And I thought, yeah, that's one use of Morse code. But I think with sounders, it's even closer to the deal,
I can honestly admit we never did that in a gymnasium exam in grade 13 when you had a bunch of hams in a multiple choice exam. Never happened.
Never happened, huh?
Not once. We might have argued about an answer too. But.
My wife was a middle school teacher. She taught science and engineering, and one of the things that she would do is teach Morse code. And she said that the kids, like you were saying, Vince, the kids were drawn to it like immediately, which is like cool. And I said, well, that's really neat, but like, why? Why do you think that is? And she says, well, besides the sort of the magical aspect of it, she said it's a code, and kids love. I mean, if you can communicate kid to kid in code, not Morse code, but any code, then you've got their attention, right? So there's that like layer on it too, and it's just funny. Like I also listened to ICQ podcast, and Martin Butler he was talking about going to some event where they would set up a code practice oscillator and the kids would come by, and if they sent their name or whatever, they get a certificate. Same thing is, he said that the kids totally loved it. Yeah. So I think that is whether it's the continental American Morse or the radio stuff or whatever, that's very cool.
Yeah.
You might spark some interest.
Yeah, and so I'm hoping so. So I produced this video. I sent it out to the Morse Telegraph Club. I said, look, share this video with your members. And then I started sharing it across to the Alberta radio clubs on a distribution list and said, look, I know some of your members love trains, and these people are looking for members, and they're trying to grow their Morse code network. So, maybe you have some members in your ranks that would be interested in this club as well. So it's all for hobby and all for fun, right? Great story. So, hey, lastly on my bench, I have to say that the HF Signals Z-Bit X is just a wickedly cool radio. So, for those of you on the video, you're now seeing it in the spotlight. It decodes FT8, it decodes CW on board. It's a very small form factor radio. I've changed out the default knob and the default front panel because I have a 3D printer, as you've heard me talk about before. And thank you to those who've been sending me emails with suggestions on my 3D printing. I appreciate that. It's a QRP radio. It uses two 18650 batteries. It has an interesting voltage input range of 6 to 9 volts. It consumes half an ampere on idle.
Wow.
Because there's a Pico and a Palm, or a Pico and a Raspberry Pi, Raspberry Pi WZCW, Raspberry Pi Zero, thank you. So it consumes a lot of current. It is not a 50 milliampere on idle radio. It's 500 milliamperes, so just something to be aware of. But it's touch screen. The software on it is reasonably stable and good. As we are recording this on the 10th of April, there is still some code to be changed or fixed for CW. It's not bad. I still catch errors when I'm trying to send paddle key at 12 words a minute, and I can't send straight key very well at all, despite my promises to the contrary. But it has some very interesting features, and it even has, oops, I touched the wrong part of the screen. It even has a built-in log function to it. So there you can see on screen the one FT8 contact I made. I didn't have to say log it. It just logged it for me. So the screen is reasonably snappy and responsive, as is the rest of the radio. It's pretty cool overall. So not a bad little portable radio. It does a lot. Built-in microphone, built-in speaker. It has jacks for built-in or for earphones and a key and an external microphone. It's a very simplistic microphone circuit. If it had a built-in tuner, it'd be the perfect radio.
How's the audio off of the internal speaker?
The audio off the internal speaker is good. The audio off the internal mic is good. I have not made sideband contacts with it yet. I've been eagerly awaiting the CW to be cleaned up. Asher Farhan shows some videos on his YouTube channel of the CW, and he turns the filter really tight. It's all DSP, and it's ring-free audio. And I experience same as I'm listening to code with it. So this thing holds some real promise for code. We just have to get the software in it working better so that it works better on code. So yep. I've been quite a busy contributor on and reading the groups.io forum. Anyway, fun little radio, $200 shipped to your door.
Wow. What's the power output?
5 watts. A little bit lower on 10 meters. Yeah. For $200, you can't expect everything. I classify this as an experimenter's radio, right?
I love it.
On-screen waterfall, touchscreen, like $200, folks. You're crazy to not take a look at this radio. US.
Now,
yeah.
How does it?
Okay, 300 Canadian.
You said it does FT8. Was that with? How did you do FT8 with it?
I don't know. I turned it on and said, "Can you do FT8?" I said, "Yes." FT8. It's built in.
Okay, that's my question. Is whatever you need is built in?
Yeah. Yep. And then you can, with the USB port and the HDMI port on board, you can hook up a keyboard, mouse, and an external monitor, and you can do other things with it too, as all the owners of a ZBitX will know. Or excuse me, a BitX will know, excuse me. So I have not begun playing with that yet because I've got too many other things on my desk right now.
Well, one small confession from me is I received mine, I think a day after Vince did, and it's still sitting in the box because
I thought you were going to say you did DXCC. But
I did DXCC with it.
What's up with you, Vince?
And I didn't even use full power.
Yeah.
It was I've got it there, and actually I was following Vince's comments and also our friend John AE5X, who is also a very early adopter, and it's been a super busy time for me around here. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna wait until the CW timing's like a little bit in better shape, and then I'm gonna pull it out and do the firmware update and get it going. But it's a cool concept, and Vince, I'm so glad that you jumped in there and actually have made some FT8 contacts and things with it already.
Yeah, it's and I'm not an FT8 player, as everybody knows, but this might just put me back there. There are some people talking about how hot it gets. The heat sink, the back panel doubles as a heat sink. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick aluminum. There's a regulator and a couple of RF transistors bolted onto it. It gets quite warm, I'm told, very warm to the touch. I know it gets warm. Some people are saying you can't pick it up. I've not experienced that, but I haven't used it a whole ton because I've been busy with other things too. So that's what's going on in my space. George, what about you, man?
Wow. Yeah, it's been busy. I've got a bunch of stuff. The big thing, of course, is the Hamvention. And so I'm trying to get inventory of product to sell for Hamvention. So Pactenas and station controllers. So at this point, station controllers are pretty well under control. I got all that kind of squared away. And I'm hoping to get a batch of Pactenas in the nick of time before Hamvention. So I'm hoping to have stuff to ship out there. So that's been the kind of big focus. But in addition to that, on the fun side of the equation, I've been getting ready for POTUS season. So my version of cleaning out the shack, I'm going to kind of channel Thomas here a little bit. And the reason I asked what you got rid of, I've been sort of going through this. I'm sort of a neurotic organizer. So like if I've got too many radios and I've got too many accessories and all this stuff, and I'm trying to organize it all, and there's a lot of like, I don't know, brain load to deal with, because like if I would go do a POTA thing, I would take this radio or that radio, but there's like 3 more radios I'd never touch. And after a while, I feel kind of bad about like, well, I never take the radio out anywhere, but when it comes down to it, I don't really want to. So I've decided that it's time to get rid of some of that stuff. And so a couple of the radios are on the chopping block, and I've already sold one. So I'm one down and at least one more to go. So I'm sorry to say the Lab 599 had to go.
Wow.
And it's a really unique and beautiful radio that I just don't like to use. It's sort of the bottom line.
Wow, yeah.
You want it to work, right?
Well, it does. It works, but it's the form factor just in the display. I just don't like it. Well, here's the thing. It's not a bad radio, honestly. I have no complaints about it. And in fact, if I were doing SOTA and there's a good chance of dropping a radio in the snowbank, that's the radio I would take, seriously. But that doesn't happen. So, its best use case doesn't really apply, because every time I want to use something like that, I would rather use my KX2 or my KX3 or my 705. I mean, those are all okay. So then the other radio that's going to
hold on. So if you want a Lab 599, you know who to email.
Oh, it's already gone.
Oh, it's gone. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
It sold it. And so I mentioned to a buddy of mine, Nick, who's a very active POTA SOTA guy, and he said, "Oh, let me mention it on the local repeater," and like the guy bought it that next day. So yeah, it went pretty quick. And I had the battery pack that bolts onto the back and the whole enchilada.
Holy cow!
Oh, yeah, it was
the battery pack.
Yeah, I had everything. So anyway, and so I think you got a pretty good deal. So I'm happy. The other one that I'm going to get rid of, I'm pretty sure, is my KH1. And I have to apologize to my friend Dan, N7CQR, who really motivated me to get the KH1, because he loves his KH1. He takes it everywhere. And I'm like,
I do too.
I should get one of those. And I know you like yours too. And I just found that every time I try to use it, I just think, I just hate this radio.
George, when Josh from Tuftelin came up to Calgary and we got to spend the day together, he put his KH1 in my hand and I did a whole activation with it. And it's a fun little radio, but yeah, it drove me crazy to use it.
Like the CW tone is like a buzz. It's not a tone.
Yeah.
And the tuning is kind of like a little wonky. I don't know. It's just, here's the thing. It is not a bad radio.
It's wonderful.
It's well designed. For what it's designed for, it's great. But in my case, if I want that radio, my KX2 is a way better radio than the KH1. So for almost no extra volume and weight, I get twice the power and a much better sounding radio and more features. And so like what I found was I just never take it anywhere. I mean, I took it on a trip and then used it a little bit beyond that, and I just never warmed up to it.
See, I take mine with me everywhere, and it's funny that you say that you would sell that one, because that's probably one of the radios I would buy a second of.
Well, we should talk.
A lot of, if I had the like the disposable income to do it, and right now I'm in the process of paring down, so even adding anything to anything is just like out of the question at the moment. But
is that because your wife would discover it when it came in the package?
What is this? Well, I mean, the truth is, I diverted a lot of my radio funds to,
chainsaw maintenance
and chainsaw and fuel and just, it really is. I had to kind of divert a lot of that to that. I wasn't going to say, oh, here, I'm going to buy some new radios while we're trying to do all these other things around the house. But the KH1, it is, I mean, it has some compromises, which is just in the nature of having such a really slimmed down. I mean, he made a design choice, which I really like, which is basically that radio is like mostly battery. like the battery is a gigantic portion of that radio. So it'll run for like, I can probably do 10 activations on one charge with that battery. But it's handheld. The speaker's really small if you're trying to use the speaker. But I find that if I'm using earphones and I can deal with the fact that there's like a little bit of a play feel with the paddles, I can take that thing and activate anywhere with it. And like if I travel anymore, that's what I'll take if I'm going by air and I'm using one bag in my travels. But you're right that the KX2 is also another radio I'd have a second of. If I could only have two radios, the KX2 is going to be one of those two radios. It's just such a superb. I think it's still probably one of the very best field radios ever made. That's if you're going for small and lightweight, it's an exceptional radio. I know so few people that have had buyer's remorse with the KX2, and usually the ones that did are just people that really were going for something more like, they really wanted like a 705 or something with a big display or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think either of those radios, the TX500 or the KH1, are bad at all. I think they're just very special purpose, and you have to have a very specific need, but also it's a bit of an aesthetic thing. Like for me, for the TX500, I never liked the fact that the cables come out the side of the radio.
I don't like that either.
That just, it makes it kind of gangly, and I wasn't, like, there's no speaker built into it, so you always have to have a speaker or the microphone plugged in. It was just a bunch of little things that were just like, if that was your only radio, it'd be fine. But between that and the KX2 or the KX3 or the 705, there's like, for me, I prefer it. So it's more like, what flavor do you like? So it's not like, ooh, that's got a bad receiver. It's not the case, right? So it's more down to like, well, okay, what do you enjoy? And I like those other, like, for example, the KX2 or the KX3 on CW, and Vince, I know you appreciate this, is on CW, those radios are incredible. I mean, superb. So they kind of set the bar. And then when you go use some of these other radios and they either don't logically quite work right, or they are sort of subpar in terms of their feature set performance, it's kind of like a disappointment. And so I got to the point where, okay, I got too many of these things, and so something's got to go. So those are the ones that I noticed over the last year and a half. I never take them out anywhere.
You bring it up. I haven't used my TX500 in the field. It's been a really, really long time. The last time I did, it was in full on rain. And I did it on purpose. I was like, hey, let's see if this really does perform in the rain and doesn't have any hang-ups. And so it was exposed completely to the rain the whole time I was doing my activation. It worked really, really well. So like for that case use, like you said, if you're afraid that you're going to drop it in the snow on a mountain, if you go into wet weather regularly, or even just, a lot of times with radio operating, I find in the field, it's not even necessarily that it's raining at the time, but you're just in a wet, like field conditions,
And I've got some friends here like Nick, NT3S, who's a big fan of the TX500, but he does a lot of outdoor operating here in the Pacific Northwest where you have weather. And for me, in that situation, I would just rather have a different radio in like a case. And I'll deal with, if it's really that bad, I'm just not going to use the radio. So it's okay. Anyway, so that's that. So I'm kind of in what'd you call it? Purge mode. Radio purge.
Good. We'll do that together. We'll see who finishes
that's right.
first.
If you're trying to get rid of that radio and you just can't do it, call me and I'll give you support. And yes, you could do it. You can sell it. By the way, you should buy my KH1 while you're selling that other thing.
Okay, what you're doing, you're putting yourself in radio purgatory.
Purgatory.
It's really funny because like if you're starting out in ham radio, you got nothing, right? No radios, you haven't bought anything, and then you agonize and you make the big purchase and you get whatever, and then you sit there, okay, I got my radio, and there's all my buddies have some other radio, and like I need the other radio, and then you get a bunch of radios, and by the time you get to be an old guy, you're like, I got more radios than time, and then you sit there and go like, what am I going to do with all this stuff? Well, and yes, Vince.
I have the answer to that. Actually, I don't have the answer to that. Bill, K4NYM, Thomas knows Bill.
Yes, Bill's great.
Bill posted on social media just today. I'm going to read this paragraph to you. Umberto Eco, who owned 50,000 books, had this to say about home libraries. So you can substitute radios for books in this case. It's foolish to think that you have to read all the books you buy, use all the radios you own, as it is foolish to criticize those who buy more books than they will ever be able to read. It would be like saying that you should use all the cutlery or glasses or screwdrivers or drill bits you bought before buying new ones. There are things in life that we always need to have plenty of supplies, even if we will only use a small portion. If, for example, we consider books, radios, as medicine, we understand that it is good to have many at home rather than a few. When you want to feel better, go to your happy place. Then you go to the medicine closet, the radio room, and choose a book, a radio. Not a random one, but the right book for that moment. That's why you should always have a good choice. Those who buy only one book, read only one, and then get rid of it, they simply apply the consumer mentality to books. That is, they consider them a consumer product and a good. Those who love books, radios, know that a radio is anything but a commodity.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Pretty good.
That's
That
a
was
really
great.
Nice recovery. Yeah.
That's great.
wonderful.
Now I've got license to go get another radio.
Well,
You can never have too many books or radios.
and Thomas doesn't have to, do his purge and be in purgatory. And I don't know about you guys, but I count them by the dozen.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, like in my case, like I'm really not getting rid of so many radios. It's really all the other stuff. But I do, yeah, I'll purge a radio that I don't care about anymore. I just don't have a lot of love for. Unfortunately, it seems like I've got an infinite capacity to love radios. And I do think something you bring up, George, is a really good point. And this has changed over time, right? Like, so people forget. I mean, we even talk about flex radios and Elecrafts and things that are kind of like can be benchmark higher end radios. But if you really compare the price and the dollar, or if you look at inflation over time, and you compare, like when I first started, $1997 to now $2025, you'd find that all the radios we have, even the contest grade benchmark radios, are a great value compared to back
Mhm.
then. I mean,
You
there's
know,
just no question.
There was a sort of, I got a chuckle out of this thing. There's a fella that does a YouTube channel, Outdoors on the Air. So I'm sure you guys know him.
Tracy.
Right? Tracy.
Yeah, wonderful guy.
And so for ages, he was like, my 817 is the best radio. I don't need more than 5 watts, and on and on. And he was like, I'm never going to get an ICOM 705. And then he got, because it's too expensive, right? And so then he said, I woke up and realized that the cost of my 817 20 years ago was the cost of the 705 today, if you adjust it for inflation.
Yes.
So I got a 705. So I was like, okay,
Way to justify it.
way to go, man. So I could relate.
I do think that barrier of entry, like for a lot of us, I was licensed in 1997. And by the way, I was born when you guys were licensed in 1972 or whatever, but just wanted to point that out.
You
here.
whippersnapper.
But in 1997, like the radios were so expensive. It was so difficult for me in those early years. I think even today, for people to start accumulating what they need, because amateur radio is not something, unless you're just getting an HT, that you can go out and buy one thing and then hop on the air and that's it. If you're doing HF, you got radios, antennas, cables, power supplies, batteries, whatever you've got. It's a system that you put together. And in the early days, if you don't have a lot of money, if you're a student or you're, fresh in the workforce or something like that, you can't just go out and buy everything all at once. And I think that kind of sticks with you to where you want to save what you have because you may need it, because back in the day, somebody lent you something from their big stash of stuff, and it's like we all have our own little personal libraries at home. I'm very much like that. If I find that somebody needs something and I've got it here, and I know you guys are like this too. I'm just happy for someone to use it, and I'm like, okay, it served its purpose. It's going to go on to the next home now.
Mhm.
Well,
So-
you accumulate it. You don't,
Yeah.
I mean, I started in 70 and I had an HR-10B Heath kit receiver. Yeah.
My first receiver.
Yes. The drift monster. It was so drifty.
Oh, no. The ICO 7053 was the drift monster.
Oh, yeah. I didn't have one of those.
Keep going anyway.
The 10B, wide as a barn, pretty drifty.
That it was.
But it got me on the air, and I built a homebrew 75-watt rig that never did more than about 35. But nonetheless, I was on the air with that. And I used that for years. And then you start accumulating. And next thing you know, I bought an actual transceiver. I bought an 820, a TS820 at a Hamfest. And next thing you know, I've got real radios and just moved from there. So it doesn't happen all at once. You're right about that, Thomas. You accumulate.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing you don't necessarily know is when you go to buy a radio, you look at the data sheet and then you watch YouTube videos and you talk to friends and decide what you want to get. And you really don't know if that was the right thing for you until you have it and you played around with it for a while or played around with something else, which is why I like to buy and sell radios. I probably keep half of the ones I buy and I get rid of half of them because, I'll try something out like the TX500. I was so excited to get it and I appreciate what they did. And it's a great radio, but it just wasn't for me. So you kind of go either figuring out what really works for you, or maybe your interests change, right? So if you're here's a good example, like the G90 is a spectacular radio for the price. For $400 plus or minus, you get a 20-watt radio, all mode, tuner built in. I mean, you really can't beat it. However, if you are a real interested CW operator, it's not a great radio. The keyer really stinks. Okay, if you go from the G90 to a K3 or KX3, it's like, man, these people know how to do CW. I mean, in so many ways, and you really appreciate it. But like, if you're just a sideband operator, the G90 is fine. Like, why would you don't like? What's the big deal? Why would you spend 3 times the price for something else? And the answer is, well, maybe you shouldn't, because you don't have to. You won't see that big of a difference. So it kind of depends on or like if you're doing digital modes. I love the 705 for a QRP radio because it's either a single USB cable or Wi-Fi connected. No muss, no fuss. So digital modes are just way easier on an ICOM than even the KX3 or KX2, even though you could do it, but it requires a thing and a more cable mess and all this complexity. So anyway, I have one more thing to mention, and then we'll go off of the intro here, and that is I tried a new logging software package, and there's actually several new ones in the last couple of years. There's like Hammers is really popular, and there's another thing I forget what it's called. But anyway, the one I've been playing with lately is called World Radio League, which is really a misnomer, because when I first heard World Radio League, I thought, what is that? Is that like some ARRL competitor organization?
That's the old magazine.
Oh, was that a magazine?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, so turns out it's not that. it's some guys built a modern logging program, and they really optimized it for multiple platforms, and it's got some really cool features in it. And I wouldn't say it's like going to challenge something like N1MM. If you're a real serious contester, you're probably going to use something like that. But I'm not. And so this software runs on tablets, it runs on PCs, I think it runs on Macs. It's got some cool features, like you log your contact and it'll look up who it is automatically and populate information and show you a map of where you've been making contacts. It's like, pretty cool. And so I played around with it on the CQ Worldwide Sideband contest, which was a couple of weekends ago. And I think I made about, 30, 40 contacts, a bunch of like Russians and Europeans and whatever on my seriously modest little station, and logged there. And it was very neat because it brings up more information than just what you log. So that turns out to be pretty fun. And it's kind of real time, because if somebody else is also using the same software, you'll see like, more information about the other station, where they're located, all this stuff. So that's worth checking out. I think there's a free version, and you can also pay for like an annual subscription. I think it's $10 or something cheap. But I think they did a really nice job of building a modern logging environment. So maybe worth checking out for the casual content. I think for POTA kind of stuff, I think it's great, because you don't need a lot of functionality. You just need a logbook.
Does it do, did you mention if it does Logbook of the World exports?
It'll do ADIF export, of course.
Okay, so ADIF.
So you can always do an
TQSL.
export. So, I mean, I don't know if it has Logbook of the World as an automatic upload, but it certainly could export an ADIF file, and then you could do it from there.
That's really cool. What is your main logging software that you've been using?
N3FJP.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I love that one.
AC log.
You know,
very intuitive.
What's this word you use, logging?
What do you use, Vince?
I don't. I log if I have to do it. If I'm doing an activation, I log, but that's it.
Okay.
Lately I've been using Polo 2K.
That's the other one I couldn't think of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, and just on another live stream, we interviewed the creator of it, Sebastian. Yeah, I've got that. I'm pretty sure I've got that right. And what a wonderful guy, and what a great platform. So
Yeah, actually, I mentioned my friend Nick N3TS earlier, and he sent me a suggestion, said you should interview Sebastian.
Yeah.
And
Is
so
that the grid tracker, Sebastian?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, great interview. Yeah,
so I mean to reach out to him and maybe get him and Nick to come on and talk about that. And I think this World Radio League logging stuff is by the same guys that did the ham study stuff. I may be mistaken, but I forget the fellow's name. Anyway, so something to check out. I think it's worth taking a look at.
He's not grid tracker.
Different Sebastian.
Different Sebastian.
Yeah. Okay, so that's about it.
One
yes,
quick
Mike?
thing, I can confirm that a beverage underwater sort of mostly does work.
Wow.
What are you picking up? Submarines?
How's the VLF work?
And when you transmit, do all the fish float to the top?
Yeah, is that a way to catch your dinner? I mean, just energize it with 50 watts, and anything within a few feet just floats to the surface. Mike, the jokes write themselves with this.
Yeah, just right there.
Okay, do you want to tell us now what you heard? We'll stop.
I've got to go make all you guys watch Failsafe. Remember that movie?
Yes.
It's hard to tell because I didn't have headphones on and I would try to A/B the two antennas, but looking at the waterfall, I went, switch back and forth. Okay, it's down a little. Noise floor's down a little bit more, I guess, and I think it's all underwater. That's how high the water's up. But I don't see the lightning that's going on. I don't see the vertical static crashes. So anyway.
That's interesting. If you think about it, it's probably not that much different than being buried in a lawn.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
there's probably a good grant in here about how far can RF penetrate fresh water.
Right.
Did you say the signals were underwater, Mike? Is that what you said a minute ago? Hey, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, I give you that one. That's a good one.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Len, I want to jump in here and talk about your project, the Teensy Maestro, which sounds like a really interesting project. I've seen some of the videos on YouTube, so I have an idea what it looks like. But before we jump into that, why don't you describe what the problem was you're trying to solve and how you came about building the Teensy Maestro?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I actually didn't attempt to solve a problem. I had bought a FlexRadio, and I was just enthralled with the idea that you could actually build something to control it. And so I kept looking through the API, and I was just amazed at how it worked. And then I stumbled almost accidentally across Enzo Stefanaffi from Italy. IW7DMH had built a little library of API functions for the Arduino environment, not for the Teensy, but for the Arduino. So on a whim, like my wife in the grocery store, I saw something and I bought it. I went out and I bought all the junk that he had listed in the bill of materials. Quite a bit of it I couldn't find. It had gone unobtainium. There was the same display that he used wasn't available anymore, and several other things. And so I thought, well, that's okay. I'll just adjust the code. Who can't do that? So I bought it all, and then I kept looking at the code, and I finally realized that there was no code to actually run the device that Enzo built. He only gave you the library and a structure or a shell program to work from. I said, oh no. So I thought, well, okay. So I kind of put it on the shelf, and then one day I was just fiddling around with it, and I said, so I got out my Arduino Dewey, and I loaded up just the shell and the library, and of course it didn't compile. And I fiddled around, and I realized, well, this is designed for the Flex version 2, and I'm on version 3. And I saw this suspiciously small buffer number of like 300 and some bytes, and I said that just can't be. So I upped it to a kilobyte. No big deal. Boom! It immediately. That's it. It worked, and it connected, and I was hooked. So then I was just really doing more experimentation with it to try to see what could I do with it. And next thing you know, I had a couple of encoders, and they were working. And I just slowly tripped into building it up a little bit. I never actually sat down and designed it and went about it like you would design something commercially. I just kind of oozed into it, for lack of a better term. And that's how I got started.
So the fundamental technical question I want to ask is, how does it communicate with the Flex? So I've got an Arduino, and first of all, what's the physical connection to the radio?
Well, there's a couple of ways you can go. The traditional way that everybody wants to think about, and I did too at the time, was, gee, isn't it easier just to use RS-232? Everybody knows it, and it works, although it's crap to use. But hey, it works. And I kept looking at the cat commands, and there's quite a few, but you can't really do a heck of a lot with a radio on cat commands. So I started looking at their API, and I was blown away. It's literally every single thing that you can do with the radio in there. And to use the API, then your connection is over Ethernet using a combination of TCP and UDP protocols. So to connect with the radio, you can do it all through TCP if you know the address or the serial number of the radio, that kind of thing. But who wants to do that? So I use UDP to read the broadcast messages that the Flex sends over the Ethernet, over a particular port. And so then when I hear that, that UDP message tells me what IP address and port and everything that I need to know to connect to the radio. And then I use a TCP connection from my Teensy Maestro to the radio to do all of the communication. And it's text-based, so I don't have to know some goofy code.
So the Arduino Dewey does, as far as I know, doesn't have a Ethernet jack on it. So how did you do so that's where I wanted to start with this, is like, how do you physically talk to the thing?
Yeah. So, and that's part of the problem. So I had the Dewey, so that's a $50 little board. And then it cost me another $30, $32 or something for the Ethernet shield that plugs into the Dewey. And then you burn half your I/O ports, or I/O pins rather, with that darn shield on there, and you take valuable physical board space as well. So we'll at some point I'll show you a couple of slides of some things that I had done, and I'll describe them. But it made a mess, and I realized, because at that time I foresaw having a bunch of knobs, a bunch of buttons, a bunch of LED indicators to show me stuff. And I realized I was dreaming, that I didn't have enough I/O pins to make this work. And so that was kind of disappointing. And I thought, well, but I had enough of it working at one point. And my technique, by the way, is you build things into a cardboard box. It makes a great ergonomic prototyping platform so that you can try stuff out. And if you don't like it, get another piece of cardboard. It takes 2 minutes. And so I would use these like DigiKey or Mouser parts box and build all my junk into it, just on a very temporary, basis. But it got it working, and I reached a stalemate where I quit working on the Teensy Maestro because I had just enough of it working that it was giving me value. And so I was operating my station from this kludged together popsicle stick and cardboard box arrangement but it worked. And then at some point in time, I discovered the Teensy 4.1. Now I had already played with the Teensy 3.6, and the 4.1 came out and it had built-in Ethernet. And that was a game changer. So with the built-in Ethernet, I thought, I'm going to see if I can port this over. And I expected weeks of work and all kinds of, 99 point some number of %, of everything ported. I had almost no changes to make to get that to work. I had a couple libraries to change, and I had a couple of Ethernet commands to change based on the new library I was using, but everything else just worked. And
so the Teensy, it has the Ethernet MAC-PHY whatever chip on there, and then like an RJ45 on the Teensy, or is that a separate board you have to hook up?
It's a separate board. It's kind of expensive. It'll cost you $3.50.
Oof.
And it just has an RJ45 mag jack on it, a couple of capacitors and some LEDs, and then a little ribbon cable and a little tiny 6-pin header that you solder into the Teensy board, and you're done.
Okay, so it's got the hardware, the MAC-PHY stuff for Ethernet built into the Teensy microcontroller then already off the shelf.
Correct. Correct. It's got a little chip. I don't know that it's MAC-5, but whatever it is.
So then, is that the current, the latest incarnation is based on that hardware?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. So that was the mystery that I was trying to understand, is how did you actually get the thing to physically talk? So once you got that, okay, so go from there. So what was then, it sounds like you realized, well, gee, I'd like to have a bunch of knobs and buttons and stuff like that. So what happens next?
Well, so I came up with surprising. I had never seen a Maestro. Well, I shouldn't say that. I had seen a Maestro, but I had never really played with one much. And I hadn't paid much attention to them because I just had the plain 6400. And I came up with the knobs that I thought would be important. Well, that turns out to be mostly the knobs that the actual Maestro has. So great minds think alike, I guess. To me, the important things were volume, AGC threshold, high cut, low cut, or width and the other for CW, CW speed, and tuning. And so as I got it put together, I started playing with this goofy contraption made out of cardboard, and I kept grabbing the wrong knob. Every time I went to do the AGC, I grabbed one of the width knobs, and I realized that I had laid this out kind of poorly. So with that knowledge, I just, in about half an hour or something, redid a cardboard and redid the knobs, and that's the configuration they're in today. But the other thing that happened there, as I was playing with this thing and realizing that even with the Teensy, even though I got a whole bunch more I/O pins now that I can use, I realized I'm still out of pins when it comes to all the buttons and all that stuff. So a guy from England, GW3 something, answered a couple of my questions, and suggested, well, why don't you use a multiplexer? And I said, oh, I wonder what that is. So I am not an engineer, so I didn't even know what a multiplexer was. And they also call them I/O port expanders. So people with that terminology, it's the same thing. So I found them on SparkFun, and I bought a couple. And sure enough, that solved my problem. So the big problem I was trying to solve was I came up myself, and I thought this was brilliant, and I only later realized how bad it was, that if you had 5 rows and 5 columns of I/O pins, wherever they intersect, row and column, if you put a switch there, you can have 25 switches for the cost of 10 pins. And I thought that was a great deal. Well, only later did I realize with a multiplexer, I use 7 pins and I have 32 switch positions. And if I had only realized then that if I had only done that in I²C, which I have now done for another project unrelated to this, you then use 2 pins that you can share with something else and get your 32. So it's still got a couple of clunky things in it that I wish I had done differently. But anyway, once I got to the doing things with the multiplexers and sort of smoothed out how I used my I/O pins, it suddenly became viable. But I still was missing one critical thing. And out of the blue, I don't even know what prompted me to do this. It was almost like an interruption of my project. I thought, I'm going to scope creep this and see if I can take this little display that I had for another purpose. I call them start and forget projects, a little junk you start and you never go anywhere with. Well, this was one. So I took that little thing and I interfaced it. And damned if it didn't work. And damned if that didn't dawn on me that I could get rid of all of the LED annunciators. I could get rid of myriad of buttons that I just didn't need because I could do that stuff right on the screen. So one of the things that was taking a lot of LEDs was going to be 1 hertz, 10 hertz, 50 hertz, 100 hertz, all the step sizes that I wanted to include, I had listed as a whole bunch of LEDs. Well, didn't need it. So once I put that screen on there, the whole thing came together. And then within 2 weeks, I had a final configuration of the thing. I had the screen probably 80% done, and the buttons and the knobs 100% done. And all of a sudden, it was an actual viable thing. And somewhere in there, I published it and put it out. It was still kind of immature, but it worked and people started building it.
Okay, so I have more technical geekery to ask you, but
Sure.
since you mentioned other people, so what is the current state of the project as far as your goal for it? Was it to make an open source project or to make something to sell, or what's the
No,
goal?
I never intended to sell it. I retired. I'm staying retired. Everybody asked me if there would be a kit. I said, if somebody will do a kit, I will support them. If somebody does PC boards, I'll support them. And so a couple people have now, particularly Lasse, SM5 GLC. I know Mike's heard that call a few times on the forum, but so Lasse's a Swedish ham, and he built one, and he decided to build a board. Now, the only disappointing thing about the board is it still takes cables and plugs from all the encoders. And I think for this to really take off, you need a board that all the encoders solder to directly, and the display plugs into directly, and then maybe cables for the or a set of sockets for the Teensy. And that hasn't quite happened yet, but if you look out on the Flex community and go through the Teensy Maestro, you'll find pictures of several things that people have built that are really quite good.
So the regular Flex Maestro does the things you're describing and also has inputs and outputs for audio, for receive audio and microphone and paddle and all that stuff. Did you try to deal with that stuff also, or is it just to control the radio?
No, strictly to control.
Okay.
So
I was curious if you tried to do the audio, like I didn't even know how you do that. So.
Well, it's the audio and the video. So the waterfall pan adapter and the audio all come in on UDP, Universal Data Protocol. And that that's a whole nother level. So my little thing does not come close to replacing a Maestro. You can do a few things. So I put some things in that I never use, trying to make it more like a real Maestro. And I realized that was a fool's errand. So I quit trying to do that stuff. And instead, what I've done most recently were things that people have asked me for. So we had Lassie in particular and several other people. My friend Dave, W4WKU, built the second one. And when he used to live over near me. And he built the second one. And the thing that was missing, and I felt it too, was that there was no acceleration on the tuning knob. And I discovered that is brutally difficult to do, at least with my level of knowledge. And so only recently, in the last few months, I dusted that idea off because Lassie kept bugging me about it, and took a different approach on it and finally solved it. And so now it does that. And then the other thing, most people, when they build this, the SD card on the Teensy board is what I use to configure the thing, so that you don't have, I kept it real simple. You just text-based configuration and you can make it yours. So to change, for example, CW messages, you just pop out the thing, stick it in your computer, change it, save it, pop it back in. Well, I built mine so that is an accessible thing through the back hole of the Teensy Maestro. However, most people didn't do that. So one guy built a cable and put the slot on the outside. That was a good creative solution. Somewhat messy. It was hard to make that work cleanly, but it worked. And so Thomas, F4H something from France, said, "Well, can't you just edit it from the PC?" I said, "Oh, you probably can, but that's past my pay grade." So he said he was going to try to do it, and I said, "Okay, great." And then he started asking me questions, and I realized he was not on the right track. So I said, "Well, let me look at that a little bit." So I did a little bit of research, found some libraries, and I said, "No way." I put them in, and within a couple of hours, I had the thing so that if you plug the power into your PC, you get a drive that is actually the SD card in the thing. So now you can edit the SD card directly from your PC. So that's another thing, and that was very recent. I just got that done not too long ago. So
Len,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I'm sure you found this out right away. We are really fussy about our VFOs and how they feel and how they turn.
Yes.
I bet you went through many of these encoders before you got one that didn't jump, was smooth. How did you go through that?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So what I did, I looked at a lot of them, and they were tremendously expensive. And I had one from another,
like $70 each.
Yeah,
expensive, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the one I had that I probably bought 20 years ago for a different project, and they sent me a bad one. And so
Of
then,
course, you don't know, right?
well, yeah, well, no, I figured it out quickly that
Uh,
it was bad. So I called them up and I said, "Can I send this back and get another?" They said, "It will send you another. Just keep that one." So I put the good one in my other project, and then one day I was looking at that thing and I saw something kind of shiny. So I pried the back off. It had a missoldered wire.
Oh,
So I got my little tiny soldering iron in there. I soldered it. It worked perfectly. So now I have this really expensive encoder and a need for one, and it worked, but it wasn't that great. It actually was not a good encoder for this application. So you're right, Mike. It just didn't. So on a whim, I mean an absolute whim, I saw on Amazon some $18 encoders that are not designed to have a knob on them. They're designed to have a pulley and a belt or a gear,
mm.
that they're 600 pulse per revolution encoder. Well, who needs that for a radio? But I thought, if it's got that many pulses, would that not smooth things out? And boy, did it. And if you put a weighted knob, and the knobs on mine are just aluminum knobs, they're not otherwise weighted, but they have enough mass that if you give them a spin, they take off. And so they are very, very smooth. So all I did was basically ignore 40 pulses. And when I got something past 40 pulses, I add one to the thing and, bump up by the step size on the Smart SDR. And that was it. So you're right to a degree, Mike, but I got lucky because I found it very quickly and almost by accident.
I remember in our early days of the Maestro, because I had one of the first Maestros and I was on the alpha test team and we were getting software every week to test, and the VFO took forever to make behave normally. Sometimes, because when you use an encoder, it has to determine which way it's going,
Right.
right? And it's a make versus break sort of thing, right? And it goes on and on and on. And then what weird things were happening, and this is now what, 10 or 15, yeah, probably 10 years ago now. And you go to turn it, and all of a sudden, because the encoder wasn't quite as clean, you think you're going up, but the encoder thinks you're going down. So it's
Yes.
backwards.
Yes.
Or it jumps a lot, and et cetera. So yeah, it's, as I say, that how hard can it be? Well, the devil's in the details, right? I mean, how many of us have shot for an HF rig? You spin the knob and go, "Well, that feels weird," and you're done. Could be the best radio going, right?
Yep.
Nope,
Yeah,
not
you're
buying it.
absolutely right. And the other thing that helped me out there was Paul Stoffrigen from PJRC, which is the manufacturer of the Teensy. And now they've moved the manufacturing, but he was the guy that designed that thing. He wrote some brilliant libraries. So he wrote a library that uses interrupts so that when you spin the knob, it never does the backup go forward crap that so many of them do. It just absolutely goes the direction you indicated. And then by me basically dividing by 40, so if you take 360, well, take 600 and divide by 40, that's the number of degrees out of the 360 that you're going to get. And so I have a parameter on the SD card that lets you set the sensitivity of it, because some people want that really twitchy, like they set their mouse real twitchy. I can't use a mouse like that, right? And it's the same thing with a VFO knob. So my knob has a variable there. And then to make this thing accelerate was brutally difficult. So I had to do two things. I had to take the 40 or whatever you put in there and ramp up the speed a little bit. So I take that down to, I think, 10 or something like that. So now you're getting pulses much more quickly for much fewer degrees of turn. You get many more counts. Then I took I use a timed interrupt of 2 milliseconds, and in 2 milliseconds, tell me how many pulses I got. And then I use that number, square it, and that was the trick, and multiply that times the number of the step size, and divide by a big constant, which is another parameter in the thing, so that you can scale it to however you want. And it turns out that about 3,000 is the right number there. And the counts that you get when it's going slow is about 50. When you really zing it, you get a couple hundred. And so for between, say, 50-ish and 200-ish, you square that number, and it ramps it up really smoothly. And I would have never guessed that. But I had to design that by empirically doing step by step by step until I finally got it where I wanted it. So that was my greatest accomplishment on the whole thing.
Boy, at the cocktail party, I bet this is fascinating. I mean, this is one of those things where, like, you sweat blood to like solve a technical problem, and there's like 5 people on the planet who are like, that's a really cool problem to solve.
Yeah, right.
But that's really exciting, because you kind of went past like press a button, send a command, got that to work. That was good. But that's a harder problem to solve. It really took some thinking.
It was. I tried to do it from the get-go. So 5 years ago almost, I tried to do this, and I kept trying to do it by, I would say, okay, when I reach the next step, I'll just jump it. Well,
yeah,
that worked, but it got very jumpy. So, Mike's nodding his head. I know you know how that goes, Mike, because it was so unsmooth that and then you would just scoot right past where you're trying to land. So this one ramps up more gracefully and ramps down more gracefully. And then I find I mostly use it on CW, because with a 10 hertz step, it's brutally difficult to get across the band, right? So now it skates right across and smoothly so.
So this is one of those things where, sometimes you use a less expensive radio or a fancier radio, and it's these kind of refinements that you it's not in a data sheet. You can't look at a data sheet and go, "Ooh, nice VFO."
Right.
And like another one that I didn't really know until some years ago, I finally figured out, like, and Mike, I'm sure you're very familiar with this, where like the CW keying, I thought, well, like, you key the transmitter on and off, right? It's pretty straightforward. And then I think I was talking to Eric or Wayne, one of the guys at Elecraft, and they're like, no, we have a very precisely controlled ramp, and then on the beginning of the key down, and then a ramp at the end of the key down, and the timing of that ramp is very precisely sorted out. It was like, really? I had no
6
idea.
milliseconds.
Yeah. It's because that shape makes a big difference.
Any shorter, you're clicking all over the band.
Yep.
Right. And I don't know why some radios let you go shorter than 6 milliseconds on the rise time.
Right.
And you shouldn't, because it's well known that that's the magic number.
Yep. And then if you can, there's a linear ramp, and then there's a sine, whatever it is, that ramps it up, and then it prevents a corner at the start and at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And so I don't have to deal with that. The radio deals with that.
But this is a similar problem in my head. It's one of those, like, well, we can make it work, but if you really want to make it work so you don't see that it's getting in your way, that's really hard.
Right.
So I totally appreciate trying to solve that.
We can do a whole other show, and we should maybe get Max on from Marconi about how to send CW over a LAN.
Well, I showed Max how to do that.
I know, but he's you know
Yeah.
he's done another cool appliance that
Yeah.
mates beautifully with this, but
Mm.
Yeah.
and he's taken that to a whole new world as well, right? So
Right.
anyway,
Right.
So, Len, when I saw, I don't know if it was on, maybe it's on YouTube, there's a picture of the Teensy Maestro, and it's very attractive. There's one thing I saw where it looks like a prototype, with like the display and some like, buttons. And then there's another one that looked really polished.
Yeah.
So is the polished one the one that this fellow, the Italian station is making?
Well, the polished one is mine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the one that's in the cardboard box is mine. And I used the cardboard, and then once I decided on a form factor, and I decided on an actual box, I bought a box from Amazon, said, okay, this is definitely going to work. And I took the aluminum plate off it and replaced it with a piece of cardboard and cut out how I thought the display would go and how the buttons would go and the knobs. And I didn't get it quite right. So I caught myself just grabbing the wrong knob all the time. So I threw that one out, built another one, cut another one out, relabeled things and moved things around and used it that way. I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks, something like that, 3 weeks. And that was it. So then I decided, okay, that's the form I'm going to actually use. And then I used my template that I built for it and drilled all the holes. And I used an old Adel nibbler that my dad had from the 60s that he used in the aerospace industry. And I nibbled out the square hole and filed it. And that was biggest pain in the neck. But then that was it. And then to give it that polished look, I simply printed a piece of plain paper in a laser printer, my front panel, set that on the aluminum, and then put the screws through it. Well, not at that point. And then I bought a piece of ABS clear plastic, like 0.015 inch plastic from Ace, literally from Ace Hardware, cut it out, only scratched it a little, and sandwiched the piece of plain paper between the aluminum and that clear plastic. And so when you see it not too close, it really looks good.
not too close.
If you get your eye right up on it, you're going to see some blemishes.
You'll never see it from an airplane, as they say.
Yeah.
I put this in the show notes, by the way, George. There's 17 pages of the Maestro Teensy in the FlexRadio community, so you can read it from birth through to, I don't know, last week, whenever Len made the last post, or somebody, or Lassie or somebody. Oh, March 18th was the last time it was updated, but it's actually it's beautifully done, Len, the whole story in there, because I've gone through it, and it's like switching from email to Slack at work, right? When everything's easy to follow. And so thank you for documenting all that in one entry. And
well, I've been encouraging, as people build them, I encourage them to, share their problems there. Too often they want to email me with, well, how do I do this? And this isn't working. It's like, put it in there, and then everybody will benefit from it. And
I thank you for doing that, by the way. As somebody who's involved with collaboration, I get the same thing, and I send them to the community. Go ask. There's 800 people that can learn from your issue or what you found, and 3 or 4 that will teach the rest of you. So it scales so well. But thank you for keeping it that way.
Yeah, well, thank you. Appreciate that sentiment, Mike.
So, Len, how many of these things are out in the wild now?
Well, by my estimation, a couple dozen.
Oh.
So,
and how many of them are like they built their own, or was it like the kit that this other fellow was putting together?
No, nobody has built a kit. One guy, Lassie, has made some boards, but to make the board, to get the boards, I put Lassie's information on my GitHub site so that he can so that other people can build what Lassie did. Another guy, Ben from Hong Kong, built one and built a really nice board, but it was bigger than the box that I have, but he never shared it. So I didn't press the issue with him. So I'm a friend of mine who is, I almost have talked into buying a FlexRadio. He is interested in Teensy's and building things. He's a maker like you, Thomas. And he really wants to put a board together for the Teensy Maestro. And I said, so next week we're going to get together and talk about that. If he does that, and if he builds a board that is has sufficiently few wires in it, there'll never be none. But if you can get sufficiently few so that the encoders go straight on the board and then through the front panel, people will build this. Because right now it's intimidating. It looks like a 1940s radio inside mine with all the scramble wiring.
What's the display that you are using?
It's 480 by 240.
I mean, is there a like a specific what's the specific interface that talks to the display? Is it like the CSI or something?
It's SPI.
Oh, it's SPI. Okay.
Yeah, SPI interface. So that's 5 or so words. The other thing I did with it, I did put a touch screen on it, but I don't do a heck of a lot with a touch screen. It's too small of a screen to be very accurate. So I just have general areas. You can open a new slice. You can change active slices. You can change TX slice. You can reset the display. And I had to put that in there because I had a loose wire and couldn't figure out why the display would go crazy once in a while. So I put a reset. So if you touch the corner of the display, it'll reset the display. And even if it was going wonky, it comes right back. And then the last thing that I did with it is if you touch the center anywhere, just the main body of it, it brings up the splash screen. And then it has a full menu system. I did a couple more scope creeps with it. I out of nowhere, right when I was busy with other parts of it, I decided I would, for reasons unknown to me, I would import a keyer that I wrote for the Teensy 3.6. And that's in fact the same keyer that I had that screen on. So I stole the screen and then I stole a code. And the way I did the CW, I don't really need it because the thing works. Well, actually, as it turned out, I'm glad I did, because now with that CW keyer in there, I can actually key the rig remotely using the Teensy Maestro. And so you like technical things, I think, George. So here's some technical for you. When I'm tired of keyers that either I've built or that I've used that aren't responsive or that aren't extremely consistent in their response. So what I did is I made the key paddles and the straight key all operate directly on the I/O pins, not on a multiplexer. And so they're not scanned, they're not polled. I use interrupts. And everybody warns you, don't do that, the confusion. Well, I just do very specific things with it, but it starts the process the same exact way every time within microseconds. I mean, you can be in the middle of something happening that interrupt won't take place for up to, I think, 6 microseconds. Well, who cares about that? So within microseconds, it's completely repeatable. And then the other aspect of it that was driving me nuts is even my good old Curtis chip from the old days. I built a keyer out of that. There were times when the dot to space ratio varied a little bit, and it threw me off. It just drove me nuts. So I never liked that keyer, even though it was pretty good keyer, especially for the day. We're talking the 80s sometime. It was pretty good, but it wasn't great. So on this one, I just wanted to see if I could get the timing really, really accurate. So what I did, I set a timer. So there's a dot timer that is a hardware timer within the chip. So no matter what else the chip is doing, anything, that timer is completely unaffected. So when that dot time, when I start the timer, because I hit a dot, that dot time, when it expires, sets an interrupt, and it immediately shuts that off and starts another timer for the dot space after it, and so forth. So, and then the same thing with the dash and all that. I use the same timer for dot, inter-element spacing, and dash. And then inter-character spacing is on you.
Well, that sounds like the right approach. I mean, I can't imagine any other way. I mean, you can either use interrupts or poll, and you can't have a polling loop with any predictability. It would have too much latency that's unpredictable when it would happen. So you have to use interrupts. I don't know how else you could do it and not drive yourself nuts.
Well, most people don't. And so I put an oscilloscope on it, and I took it to 1,000 words a minute, and it held.
Oh, good. See, I think if you did a polling loop, you could probably do it if the chip does absolutely nothing else.
Well, the chip is fast. So the Teensy uses a Cortex, an ARM Cortex M7 at 600 megahertz. The Dewey, which was plenty fast for this, was 48 megahertz on an M3 core. So you could get away with it, but like you say, why would you?
Yeah, I mean, because you could be doing something as simple as updating the LCD display or getting some serial command coming in the buffer, and that's going to throw your timing off enough if you do it in a loop. So
exactly.
you have to do it with interrupts. That's smart. So that's built into the current Teensy Maestro.
Yeah, it is.
And then so what's the output? Is the output the key line to the radio, or do you package it up and send it as an API call?
Two outputs. One output is directly to the radio through a keying transistor. And then in retrospect, I should have made that an opto-isolator, but hey, it works. And in fact, I did a POTA activation the other day with a friend's 7300, and we used this keyer. And I'm so glad I brought it, because it was so awkward. The 7300 is not a good CW machine, I don't think. I've just gotten spoiled, I guess. So anyway, we used that, and it worked great. But then the other output that it has, it's a menu selectable item. You say how you want the key output to be, Ethernet or local. If you say Ethernet, then it does package up the commands, and they're complicated. Mike stepped away for a second, but he'll be able to tell you that keying a radio remotely with CW is terribly difficult. And so what I did was I used the API that Flex gave you, which contains a set of timing, so that it's got a serial number and a time, so that these packets, as they go, will not let the data element that you're sending go past what you said. Now, if you have enough latency in the internet, you can get somewhat choppy CW still. But I found that if you turn the delay up, it banks those commands, and you get very smooth. So I would be up in the middle of nowhere camping, where I'm on my cell phone as a hotspot with my Teensy Maestro connected through Soft Ether VPN and connected to the radio. And
which is back at home. Oh, and that worked okay.
Worked phenomenally well.
Yeah, see, I thought what you're going to say is well, at home when you're on your router, it's no problem. But with the vagaries of the internet and latency and varying connections, then maybe not. But it sounds like it worked pretty well.
It does, because Flex did some brilliant things. So, Mike, I'm just guessing here on a couple things, right? But my guess is that depending on the amount of CW delay that you dial in. And I would dial in 350 milliseconds of delay. And that covered me for like the 100 or 200 milliseconds that I would get on the internet over this horrible connection. And then if it banks up that much stuff, it's going to give you a very smooth run of CW because it's got everything in order as it belongs, timed so that the elements will be timed. So if I'm sending with a straight key and sending with my crappy fist, it will put that crappy fist just as I keyed it on the air. So it's really it's the API that does the heavy lifting there, and it's brilliant.
I don't know exactly how they do it, but the more I poke around, the more I find out that our guys did a lot of thinking ahead of time of real world situations, and that's one of them. The one I totally changed the subject for, one of the weird ones I heard of, there's, in a contest station, you often need to interlock yourself off because the other station's transmitting. So in the flex world, there's just two RCA cables. You tie the two radios together. You turn a switch on, and it says, "Hey, if this guy's transmitting, I can't transmit." So you step on the foot switch to call a guy, and you can't because the other guy's transmitting. What I didn't know is that we buffered that, so that if I'm going, call on, Kilo 4 Sugar Whiskey Lima, and the other guy's transmitting, my radio doesn't actually go into transmit, but it buffered the audio. And the minute he released it, it lets it go out on the air, which I don't think any other radio does. But so it doesn't surprise me that even in your CW buffering sending and the microsecond timestamps we send with the, transmitter on, transmitter off, spaces, so many milliseconds, all like I thought, how hard can this be? And I started to see if I could even chat GPT sort of write it. Not a chance. My head got lost like in a 4x4x4 chess game. And I went, no, not my world.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you, when I tried to make it work, assuming things, it didn't. So Eric, KE5DTO, responded to somebody else's questions about this, and I got it. I finally got what I needed, and I tried it, and my first attempt was unsuccessful because I didn't do the math right. I realized a couple days later what I did wrong, fixed it, and it's been right ever since. And then I tried various experiments of different, how can I make this not choppy? And all I did was change the CW delay, and it smoothed it out. And that's when I figured. So that's my guess, Mike, is that they did some buffering there based on that value, which makes sense. I mean, it's brilliant. There were some people criticizing Flex for the CW performance when actually nobody else does remote CW anywhere as close to as well as this.
I tried to get it out of Eric what they were doing at Ellicraft because they're into that world now as well.
Yeah.
But the look I got from Eric George, and Eric's a wonderful guy, and those guys are equally visionaries, and they think far enough ahead to consider all this. And he sort of implied we don't do it the way you do it because we make it very public, but they do something very similar. So the internet is incredibly elastic. Like you'd think that, hey, I'll just monitor a COM port for hardware level changes, and I'll put dash on one and dot in another, and technically it works, but the jitter kills you.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's the thing about CW too that makes it complicated. You're talking about the hardware and the software side and the latency and timing and all that stuff. But on the human side too, we're very discriminating with CW, more so than you think you would be when you're first learning. You're just, you feel, oh, it's a dit and a dash, and I'm just trying to put it all together. But once that language portion of your brain's like kicking in, you really notice differences that you can't. It's like someone bakes you a cake and you taste it and you're like, there's just something not quite right with it. I can't put my finger on, like they put too much baking soda in or something. You're trying to figure it out. And I find that with CW like that, I often beta test, alpha test radios that just they have not got the CW keying down yet, because I think
Right.
that they don't have a lot of beta testers who are doing CW or whatever testers, and it's hard to sometimes describe what's going on because of that mix between, is it the hardware, is it, am I adjusting, and then sometimes your brain will try to adjust to what's going on there. I'm really curious because I don't know a whole lot about the hardware side of this or anything, but if you were to make hardware changes, would you have to change how you do your CW on it? Like if it's a different processor, things are done differently, and like let's say you upgrade the hardware that you have now, the processors and stuff, would it change your just the whole formula for how you got the CW to work well with your timing?
You asking Mike that or me?
You actually, I was asking you
Oh,
mainly
oh
well,
no.
both of you, to be honest, but
Well,
I assume Flex has probably have had to do this over the years because
yeah,
they've had so many different models.
yeah. So from the Teensy Meister perspective, no, absolutely not. I've had this code working on a Dewey. I've had it working on a Teensy 3.6, now the Teensy 4.1. I want to say I put it on a Raspberry Pi Pico, just
Wow.
fooling around with it. Because of all you're doing is turning bits on and off at the now in the radio is another story, because in the radio you're having to deal with the waveform itself. And I don't have to do that because Flex does it for me. They take care of me on that. So, but I think it's ironic that the simplest form of modulation, CW, on a modern radio is the hardest thing to get right.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
As
ironic.
as I am seeing on this ZBitX.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
You
was
know,
laughing at all your texting because I knew exactly where you were coming from.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
But
sometimes too like there was what radio? Oh, I know what it was. The Zygu, or it's actually Shegu GSOC, GSOC, which was like a display unit that you connected up to a G90, or I think an X 5105, or some of those radios that they made at the time, and that was one that I tested early on. It was actually a production model, but they tend to throw their beta. If
That is the production model,
it
man.
is the production model, is the beta, is the beta unit, and they never ever ever got the CW timing right on it. They never could, and the
yeah.
way that I don't know how they did it internally, but the way they did it was basically the buffering and things, the processor speed got in the way of them actually being able to make the keying work properly. And
Yeah.
so they were never able to do it.
So I think that's what George and I were talking about in terms of
Yeah.
interrupts. So
hmm
yeah.
Yeah.
When it comes to writing code for this kind of stuff, interrupts are a scary thing, and everybody is specifically told to stay away from them. You're gonna have problems if you use interrupts, and you certainly can if you don't control them very carefully. But in my case, I kept what's in the interrupt code very short and let the timers do the work, so that I'm not sitting there counting pulses over, iterations through the through the loop or something silly like that, or some kind of polling goofy mechanism. That's never going to be accurate. I chose a way that I knew had to be accurate and got results that were way beyond what I expected. And when I put things on the oscilloscope and ramped them up to extremely high speeds, I found some things in my own code that I wasn't too proud of, and that caused me to rethink how I did some of that. So, but once I got it working at speeds that are just ridiculous, then I think I limit the speed on the Teensy Meister to 5 to 100 or something like that. Any lower than 5 and it takes too long, you can't stop it.
So this is really a very impressive project. I mean, I know you started out by I'll just try a couple things, and it kind of, organically grew from there. But
Yeah.
to get it to the point where you're really working on some harder problems like the CW transmission and the VFO working properly, that's not easy. I mean, that really takes a lot of thought and probably more than one restart on a particular problem where you go like, well, I can't get this thing to work, and then like you have an epiphany one night. It's like, write that down before I forget, because
that's very much it. So with the acceleration problem, I had tried it, and I had stub code everywhere on all the different attempts, probably 5 or 6 attempts that I tried this. And I always kept coming back to the same thing. Finally, one day I said, all right, I need to do it one thing at a time. And so what I did was, I'm just going to take a timer and count pulses and just look at the number. Just empirically look at and see what kind of numbers I get. And that gave me a sense of the scale of how fast could I spin it, and what's the limits that I can spin it. And when I'm spinning it slow, how many counts am I getting? And that alone started me towards, okay, so if I take that number times the step size, and that kind of worked. I said, okay, I can back off of that. And I had already done thresholds. If I pass this threshold, I'll do this step size. I pass this threshold, too jerky. I said, okay, so what happens if I just do it by multiplying something? And I couldn't figure out what to multiply that would make sense other than to square the value. And then it worked too well, and it took off. And I said, okay, so let me divide out the big number down. And so that'll give me a curve that I can more or less operate on. And so, not being a mathematician or an engineer, I think that might work. And damned if it didn't.
Well, I'm sorry to tell you now, but I think you're an engineer.
Yeah. Well, I
Say
appreciate
same thing.
that.
I think you've punched your ticket on that score.
Yeah.
So Len, as we kind of wrap things up a bit here, what did we miss? Was there something in this project that you think we should talk about that we didn't touch on?
I think we really hit most of it. I definitely wanted to talk about that acceleration, because that was my big win. But it's a fun project. I guess something else to talk about is who can build this. So this is not a beginner project. So don't think that. But then again, it's not an advanced project either. It's really kind of a middle of the road. If you can wire up a Heathkit and do point-to-point wiring, that's what it is. It's all point-to-point wiring, unless you buy Lassie's board, and then it's point-to-point to the board. But he does make it quite a bit easier if you built from his boards. But even if you just did it my way, and use one of those little prototyping boards, and just the big trick, I put a builder's guide out there on the GitHub. I put a user's guide, and I put a schematic and all that stuff, so you can take a look at it and decide pretty quickly if this is too complicated or something that you could attempt. And I think most experienced hams, if you've built some kits, you could probably do this.
So would you have any advice for people who are thinking about their project that may not be this, it may be something else, but along these kind of lines? What suggestions would you have for people who might want to build their next project from scratch?
Step by step. You generally try to boil the ocean with these things, and that's what I did with my VFO acceleration. I tried to do it all at once, and I couldn't do it. Years later, I'm like you say, epiphany in the middle of the night. I'm just going to do this one little thing and get it working well, and actually understand why it works. Then you're making progress. So for me to get CW to work over the internet, particularly over the WAN, I really had to take that step by step, I got some help from Eric, somewhat indirectly, but still it was Eric's brilliant post that he put out there that got me where I was going. And then the questions the other guy had asked were all my questions, and they got answered sequentially. And there again, it until I truly understood how that interface worked, I had no chance of making it work. And so Lynn Hansen approached me about how did I make CW work. Max Mucci, who did the Morconi, he approached me how that works and so forth. So everybody that's got a working one, I didn't have the first working one. Some other ham got it working before I ever did. But it was off of that knowledge that I got from that set of interchange that let me take that stepwise approach. And once I took it stepwise, I got it.
Well, that's some really sage advice. So especially a complex project like this, where you throw it all together, it's hopeless. I mean, you'll never get it to work. So piece at a time makes a whole lot of sense. Modularity is your friend.
Yeah,
whether it's hardware or software. That's so true. Well, if people want to follow you, what would be the best way for them to find out more about this? Or if they want to ask you any questions, get in touch with you?
The best way is through the Flex forum. So if they get on the Flex community forum and look up, just search Teensy Maestro, it'll take you right to the thread. And there it is. If you look at my QRZ site, I also have links to that, to my GitHub, and some information right in the thing itself, right in the QRZ page itself. So any of those ways. I don't prefer email. I prefer, well, I don't mind if people email me. I don't prefer that as a way to help them because it doesn't help anybody else. So
yep, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The community, by the way, in case you don't go look for the show notes, is pretty simple. It's community.flexradio.com. Great.
Mike, do you have any closing comments, since this is sort of related to a thing or two that you know about?
No. I think Len's done an amazing job, and to bring this forward, and it's been a while since I've gone through the whole thing, so I was paging through and seeing some of the, the cases and stuff people have done. And, if I do a project, I'm not going to do it unless I can make it look like I didn't build it in my basement. But that's just me, And yeah, it doesn't mean it doesn't work any better or worse. It's got to look like the labels are at least straight. But there's some beautiful things, and with the tools we have available from like Front Panel Express, or whatever to build or 3D printing, or anyway, great project, Len, and I'm sure it's turned into a labor of love. I can tell you for one thing, if he really just wanted to have a Maestro, he would have bought one.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah,
That's
especially at $5 an hour for your labor.
Yeah, that's right.
It would have been cheaper to buy it.
Oh, I think he nuked that a long time ago.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right. Thomas, any parting words before we wrap?
Well, I think that so not being a Flex owner, and I think probably
we can fix that.
I was going to say there's plenty of peer pressure to go along here on the show to get a Flex, and I'm sure at some point in the future I'm going to end up getting one. But I've always kind of looked at larger shack stations or contest grade radios as something I'm less interested in because I'm a field guy and I don't take it to the field. But every time we talk about Flexes, like I think the name is so appropriate because the system is so flexible. And I kind of think like this whole discussion, would we have been having this 15 years ago with any radio on the planet? Like, there was, that was, commercially available for people. And now here there's like this community. There are people like you, Len, who are building these really cool additions that are just like purely like homebrew type things that extend the functionality of the radio. And I think as a platform, it is just such a fascinating platform for a radio. And that's what really entices me.
Well, that's
and you know how we got there? Go ahead, Len.
Oh, that's brilliantly said, Thomas. That's my exact feelings on that. It's a platform that provides me endless joy, not just operating it, but building to it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know how we got here? Steve N5AC, our CTO, says, and Steve's a rover microwave type of guy, and he had what has he bought? A Kenwood 732, and he had bought one of these, and he goes, he either didn't like the display or the way something didn't work, and why can't I get in there and just change stuff? Because he's, is of that mindset, like a Len mindset even. And so when Gerald and these two guys, there's a whole story about how this happened, met up and they started bringing direct sampling software defined into the real world. Steve kept this in mind, going, "No, I want people to be able to hack it and make it their own."
Yeah.
So what I love about this is that we've had 20 years of people gramping and moaning that radios are surface mount components. They're too tiny. You can't work on it, on all that stuff. And with this kind of technology and other brands who are doing the same kind of thing, you can do that. It's just not the way your grandfather would have done it, right? You got to learn a different set of skills. It's not about getting your big fingers in the box and soldering a wire necessarily. It's about how you're going to deal with it through the software and innovate that, and maybe build a piece of hardware that talks through the software. So yeah, I think that's just great. I love that. Vince, how about you?
Modes.
Oh, good.
Oh, sorry, let me grab it. Including modes.
Oh, yeah.
You've heard me mention waveforms. You want to build a new modulation scheme, you don't have to buy a new radio.
Yeah.
We already have free DV totally integrated in the radio. If you buy Meniere's, is that his name?
Yeah,
his add-on box.
Yeah.
And you just point the IP address of the box to the over to the radio, and all of a sudden you have this waveform, this new mode,
right,
already built in and working.
Yep.
That's fascinating.
Nobody else does it. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know why I cut off.
Yeah, well, I think that's the way the world's going to be. I mean, all of the architectures are moving that way. Whether or not the vendors choose to expose that is a separate question. So I'm curious.
That is the question.
Yeah, we're going to get Eric on here soon to talk about the Elecraft K4 architecture, how that's applicable for remote operating. And I'd like to understand more of this kind of stuff with their architecture and, how open and amenable they are to others to innovate on top of it. So we'll see. Vince, any last comments before we wrap?
Damn, I might have to buy a Flex just to try this stuff.
I'll send you one.
I keep looking at 1500s because that's like my speed, but the architecture is so old, and I don't have a PC that old anymore to drive it, which is unfortunate. But
at least that one's USB.
I like the form factor of it. It's small.
Yeah.
I could get into that. But anyway, it's cool stuff.
Yeah. So here's something to think about. So for like Thomas and Vince both, I use my 6400 on field day. It doesn't, you don't think of it as a portable rig, but I do. It's very lightweight. So even though it's not a small form factor, I wish it was smaller, but it's still not bad. And I literally just set it on the seat of my fifth wheel camper, put my laptop and even a monitor and the Teensy Maestro, all my junk just sits right on the table, and I'm at field day and with very little muss or fuss.
Yeah.
And then with a radio that is so fun. I just recently did a POTA activation with a friend of mine with his 7300. And I realized how spoiled I am having the Flex. And then every time we talked about things, he said, "Oh, that's the Flex, huh?" And I said, "Yeah, that's the Flex." So he and I are going to do field day this year, and he's going to have his 7300 out, and I'm going to have my Flex out. I know where he's going to spend all his time.
I mean, the front end alone would probably drive me to the Flex. I mean, the 7300's not a bad radio in general. A lot of people have them, they love them. But like in places like field day where you've got all that RF dense environment, it just it doesn't perform as well.
No.
And I guarantee you that Flex, being more contest grade,
there's this
not sweat it.
Yeah.
There's this Aura that they're $5,000 are too expensive, and And the original for like 5,000 was, or the 3,000. And I'm only saying this because we've been trying to get this message out, and we fail at it hugely. But if you're even thinking of, and I'm sorry to turn this into, oh wait, we're a sponsor. Turn this into
Go
a
ahead.
commercial.
Go ahead, Mike. I can always edit it out. Go
You know,
ahead.
if you find a used 6300 and bring it up to current software, which might cost you $149, you're still now a current radio.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what I wanted. That was my
Yeah. I mean, when I looked at buying the Flex, I think it really is kind of confusing to people because at least like with the 6400 brand new, they were $2,200, and what's the $8,400 now is like 2,400. 25.
Yeah,
So okay.
24.99.
So if you look at that, okay, it's more than a 7,300 for sure, but it's not a $4,000 radio. You know,
Right.
I mean,
But you can buy a used 6300 for $1,200 or $1,300.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And you can take it to field day.
Yeah.
And even though this does sound
Okay,
like an
shut up.
ad for Flex,
I wonder why.
truthfully, it's not like we have to say this stuff. We use these products ourselves. By the way,
We would say it anyway.
we would say it anyway.
what you're saying.
For sure. And at field day, upcoming field day, we will have a 7,300. We're going to have a K3, and we're going to have a Flex 6400, and we're going to have a Yaesu FT 710. So those are our four main HF radios. So, and we've used pretty much the same radios last year, and they got along fine. They're all on different bands, and we have bandpass filters. It was fine. So you guys are saying, poo-pooing the 7,300 for field day. Our 7,300 worked just fine on field day.
You have to have that bandpass filter. So.
Gotta
yeah.
have- yeah. So,
For sure.
So at our club, at our Boulder Amateur Radio Club field day, we have somebody brings an FPDX 101 MP, if you can believe it.
Wow.
Great
Unbelievable.
radio.
And a crane.
Wowza. And then lets all manner of people use it.
And a back
I'm
brace.
amazed. And then the other radio we use is an old TS590. And without those bandpass filters, somebody forgot to put the bandpass filters on once, and we were killing each other.
Yeah, you have to have the bandpass filters.
Gotta have
That's in
But
there.
then-
And all the Flexes have bandpass filters except the 6300.
Right. So a friend of mine, the one that built the second Teensy Maestro, Dave, W4WKU, and I went out and we put our antennas about 100 yards apart, parallel to each other. What could be worse? We each had a 6400. He was running 100 watts. I had an amplifier with me. I was running 500 watts. We operated on harmonically related bands without a single issue.
Wow.
And we occasionally operated, one of us on CW, one of us on sideband on the same band. Well, we knew we were on the same band, but it wasn't crippling. We actually could do it. And until we got too close, we got away with it.
We're going to be able to test that. Just come to think of it, my buddy Garrett, the other guy with the radio trailer, he just bought his 8,400 or 8,600. I forget what he bought. Anyway, he's got one of them. So we might just try that, like put both of them on 20, one on CW, one on sideband, and see how it works.
See how it works.
Yeah,
You
I'd be
might
very curious to
surprised.
see how that would work out, because that's of course the killer is that two modes in the same band and you're kind of done.
Right.
But who knows?
I'll-
We'll see what.
I'll just
how
say
it works.
turn off the wide noise blanker.
Don't use it.
Yeah, don't use the WNB in that case. When we first did that, I could see the CW jumping on my noise floor, and I turned off the WNB and it went away. So
And the reason it does that, when we say wide, it looks at the entire spectrum. And
like
then
7 megahertz
produces
wide.
Yeah, like 7 megahertz
That's a good
wide.
tip.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so we're going to say our 73. So, Len, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real treat, and I'm just so impressed and amazed with your project. Now I want to go check
Thanks
it out.
for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you for sharing it with the community. So if people want to check out your source code and understand how it works and all that, speaking for myself, I'd love to take a look at it and maybe play around with one.
Yeah. Call me anytime. It's all out there on GitHub. So go to my QRZ page. There's a link to the GitHub, and from there you can find the source and the object, everything you need.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So from all of us at the Ham Radio Workbench, we'll say 73.
7 3s.
7-3.
7-3.
3 all. Thank you.